Chapter 101, Dragons Roar Under the Sea. After telling the story, Yuan Xing couldn't help but sigh. This person not only possesses an extraordinary natural talent in cultivation, which is rare in the world, but he also has remarkable willpower and courage, which are equally scarce. Those 17 powerful puppets are formidable, and most cultivators would avoid them at all costs. Yet Zhang Haobo takes a different approach and uses them as sparring partners. Tisk, 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 if this person doesn't meet an unfortunate end, he's destined for greatness. Li Fan agreed. What you say, fellow Taoist Yuan, is absolutely true. After a long pause, there was no further message from the other side. It seemed that Yuan Xing had gone to inform others about this matter. A cultivator can typically form the 24C fixing swords only after entering foundation establishment, but Zhang Haobo, who recently entered the qi condensation stage, managed to form them already. Is he particularly suited to this technique? Or is there some other reason? Interesting. In a burst of curiosity, Li Fan immediately set out to investigate the situation at the Tianyang Cave. The Tianyang Cave was located beneath the sea in a dormant underwater volcano in the western part of the Kongyun Sea. Since its emergence due to a volcanic eruption, the surrounding underwater volcanic activity has increased. On his way, Li Fan occasionally spotted groups of qi condensation stage cultivators who were excited and couldn't stop talking about Zhang Haobo, who was currently engaged in a sword trial. They mentioned that Zhang Haobo was now able to endure the onslaught of the 17 puppet mechanisms for almost the duration of a joss stick burning. Many people used the opportunity when Zhang Haobo attracted the puppets' attention to sneak into the mansion and seek opportunities. However, one joss stick's time was too short for them to discover anything, and they would be killed by the enraged puppets before they could react. But there were reports that Zhang Haobo had made significant progress through these repeated trials. Perhaps he would soon advance to the mid-qi condensation stage, and at that point, his strength would allow him to restrain the puppets for a longer period. This would enable others to explore the mansion while he held the puppets at bay. Zhang Haobo didn't seem to mind this behavior, and he didn't express any dissatisfaction. He continued his repetitive cycle of resting, sword trials, and resting. Therefore, more and more cultivators began harboring various schemes. Of course, some came purely to witness the remarkable feat of Zhang Haobo fighting 17 puppets on his own. Before long, Li Fan arrived in the area where the Tianyang Cave was located. Due to the active underground fires, the water temperature here was noticeably higher than in other areas. The sea's surface was scattered with dead fish, even though it had been cleaned up once. Fortunately, Li Fan had made preparations before coming. He activated concealing form and fire protection talismans and then submerged into the sea. As he descended, the water temperature continued to rise. Near the sea floor, the water was almost boiling. Inside an underwater volcano crater, searing magma continuously erupted along with billowing white smoke. Once the magma met the seawater, it cooled rapidly, forming black stone that piled up and spread outward. Many cultivators had gathered around the volcano. They didn't mind the boiling seawater or the spectacular eruptions of the underwater volcano. All of their attention was focused on Zhang Haobo, who was meditating not far away. As Li Fan approached, he heard people whispering. Just now, in his first battle in the mid-qi condensation stage, it seems like he didn't last much longer than before. What's going on? You don't understand. Didn't you notice that his techniques, power is similar to when he was in the early qi condensation stage? He's clearly still adapting to his breakthrough. That's right, I'm certain he'll endure for the time of 2 joss sticks burning this time. In the midst of the discussions, Zhang Haobo suddenly opened his eyes and stood up. With a calm expression, he dashed into the crater. The onlookers didn't follow him. Instead, a watery screen lit up in the center, displaying the scene inside the mansion. It seemed that the 17 puppets were not just lifeless objects. Anticipating Zhang Haobo's return, they had already set up an ambush at the mansion's entrance. As soon as he entered, the puppets immediately launched an attack. Zhang Haobo remained calm and immediately surrounded himself with 24 deep blue water swords, blocking the puppets' attacks one by one. He swiftly moved through the gaps between the puppets, and in the blink of an eye, he had broken through their blockade and emerged from the encirclement. He then flew into the air. What is he trying to do? He's not just defending anymore. Is he planning to use an offensive approach instead? Amidst the exclamations of the onlookers, Zhang Haobo gazed at the puppets below with focused eyes and formed a hand seal. In an instant, the 24 water swords drastically increased in speed, striking the mechanical puppets like a furious storm. The water swords moved like graceful spirits, creating countless illusions. At a glance, it seemed like hundreds or even thousands of water swords were attacking simultaneously. The mechanical puppets were incredibly tough, and the water swords left only shallow marks when they struck. But the attacks caused the puppets to momentarily hesitate. However, as soon as they recovered from this brief pause, the water sword attacks continued, trapping them in a cycle of rigid movements. The onslaught of water sword attacks resembled a rushing waterfall, non-stop and relentless. Zhang Haobo, using his strength alone, was actually suppressing the 17 puppets. Outside the mansion, the cultivators who witnessed this scene were left speechless, their hearts filled with amazement. Is Zhang Haobo really only in the mid-chi condensation stage? What cultivation technique is he practicing? He's incredibly strong. I heard he's been cultivating for just over a year. He's a true genius. Fellow Taoists, let's go. I see that these puppets can't lift their heads now. It's the perfect opportunity for us to explore the mansion. In the crowd, someone suddenly spoke up, inciting others. The idea sounded reasonable, and many began to feel eager. However, at that moment, a burly man shook his head and said, "I think not. Zhang Haobo's move is truly terrifying, but it must consume a lot of spiritual energy and is difficult to sustain. I'm afraid this time, he won't last as long as the previous attempt." The crowd fell into deep thought and eventually nodded in agreement. Li Fan, on the other hand, kept his eyes on Zhang Haobo in the water curtain. The move that Zhang Haobo had just used was known to Li Fan. It was a deadly technique from the sea-fixing sword technique. Dragon's Roar. This technique involved the swords moving like dragons, attacking freely and expansively with a wide range and a fast attack frequency, making it a powerful offensive move. It required an extremely strong consumption of spiritual energy and was typically only usable by those in the foundation establishment stage. Even the previous cultivator, Bai Li Chen, who was also in the mid-chi condensation stage and practiced the complete version of the sea-fixing sword technique, couldn't perform this move. What puzzled Li Fan was that although Zhang Haobo had extraordinary talent, he was still only in the mid-chi condensation stage. The Dragon's Roar was not something that could be sustained for long. Yet, looking at Zhang Haobo now, he seemed completely confident and unconcerned about running out of spiritual energy. Why was that? Chapter 102, Tian Yang's Roar. Just as Li Fan was feeling puzzled, he suddenly sensed something and his expression changed as he looked around. In the deep sea, tiny specks of blue light were converging from all directions. Heading towards the Tianyang cave, Li Fan reached out and intercepted one of the blue light points, examining it in his hand. Pure water elemental spiritual energy. In an instant, Li Fan realized what was happening. He made the most accurate decision. He activated the stalking shadow technique in an instant. His figure became like a phantom, rushing into the volcano. The others were still astonished by the increasing number of blue light points. A water spirit body. Zhang Haobo is actually a water spirit body. Someone finally reacted and exclaimed, "I understand now. A water spirit body is naturally attuned to elemental spiritual energy. As long as he's within this vast sea, he doesn't need to worry about running out of spiritual energy. Even if he consumes it quickly, the abundant water elemental spiritual energy in the surroundings can replenish it rapidly." Does that mean, darn, someone beat us to it? Friends, hurry! The knowledgeable chi condensation cultivators, like Li Fan, rushed into the volcano to seek opportunities. But Li Fan, who had moved ahead of them, had already crossed the magma inside the volcano and reached the Tianyang cave. Passing through the battling puppets and Zhang Haobo, Li Fan scanned the area with his divine sense, trying to find any traces of He Zhenghao's remains. However, this place had witnessed several intense battles and was now in ruins. The full power of the 17 nascent soul puppets was truly terrifying. The solid floor of the cave had been eroded as if it had been cut by a strange force. There were no complete bodies to be found, not to mention any storage rings. Only some fragments of the ground remained. Li Fan's heart skipped a beat as he saw the approaching cultivators. He couldn't afford to be too picky, so he decided to collect all these fragments in a hurry. Then he charged deeper into the cave, attempting to find anything valuable. Just at that moment, he suddenly heard a voice in the cave, a voice that sounded ancient and mechanical. "Tian." Li Fan's figure hesitated as a sense of unease washed over him. He looked towards the source of the voice and saw one of the puppets. These dark red mechanical puppets, which had been suppressed by Zhang Haobo's dragon's roar, all this time, seemed to be undergoing some kind of transformation. Anger had built up within them. Like a dormant volcano erupting all of a sudden. Cracks began to appear on the puppets' bodies, revealing a slightly eerie blackness within. Yang. Seeing this, Zhang Haobo intensified the attack of his divine sea swords. From the looks of it, he still had reserves of strength even after the intense battle from before. The puppets were still at a disadvantage, but Li Fan's unease grew stronger. So, he decided to turn back against the flow of people. More and more cracks formed on the puppets, like shattered porcelain, breaking into countless tiny fragments. The multitude of water swords in the air suddenly halted. Zhang Haobo gazed in astonishment at the scene unfolding before him, completely dumbfounded. How is this possible? Not only Zhang Haobo, but all the cultivators present were shocked by this sight. Their eyes darted back and forth between Zhang Haobo and the scattered fragments, filled with disbelief. Was this puppet's toughness merely for show? Or had Zhang Haobo hidden his true cultivation level, appearing to be a chi condensation cultivator on the surface but actually being a powerful expert who concealed his true strength? Li Fan was equally stunned by this unexpected turn of events, coming to a halt in his tracks. He stared at the scattered puppets, his thoughts racing. Then, in the midst of the silence, all the fragments started to vibrate. The mechanical sound resounded once more. This time, it came from all the fragments combined. Thousands of voices echoed simultaneously, resonating throughout the Tianyang cave. Weaker. In a spine-chilling sound, these black and red fragments trembled as if they were living creatures, slowly moving and converging in one place. In the midst of the faint, creaking sounds, these fragments slowly merged together. Then, Li Fan's sense of crisis peaked. Suddenly, he accelerated and flew towards the exit of the cave. As he passed by the dazed Zhang Haobo, he slightly altered his course and grabbed him. Fellow Taoist Zhang, run! To prevent any struggle, he immediately used the insect binding technique to immobilize Zhang Haobo. Still in a daze from watching the unusual behavior of the puppet fragments, Zhang Haobo felt a sudden loss of control in his body when he heard the voice. Startled, he heard the words spoken and felt somewhat relieved. Looking towards the person, he noticed that they concealed their appearance, making it impossible to see their form. However, with a single gesture, they could immobilize him completely, leaving no room for resistance. Their strength seemed unfathomable. Zhang Haobo's heart shuddered as he allowed this mysterious individual to lead him through the magma, out of the volcano, and back to the seabed. As the puppet fragments completed their reformation, a black giant hand, full of cracks, appeared in front of everyone. A dazzling dark red light flowed through the cracks in the giant hand. A mechanical and angry roar emanated from the giant hand. Yang's soul. Not weaker than man. In the midst of a roar reminiscent of an ancient ferocious beast, the giant hand's 5 fingers clenched into a fist and struck forward. Seeing this, Li Fan, who was escaping at high speed with Zhang Haobo, changed his expression and increased his speed. A thunderous explosion resounded from the volcano. Amidst the intense blast, thick smoke billowed into the sky. In an instant, it erupted from the sea floor to the sea surface. And then, into the sky. After a moment of silence, an even more violent rumbling echoed from the seabed. Rolling black clouds appeared from the depths of the sea, exploding and spreading in all directions. Like a rampaging herd, they surged forward. With each explosion, the range of the black clouds doubled. From the smoke columns that pierced the heavens and earth, crimson streaks shot in all directions. Li Fan ran all the way and finally brought Zhang Haobo to a safe area. Looking back at the raging inferno, he couldn't help but shudder. However, it seemed that all of this was just the beginning. The heavens and earth trembled, and the entire Kongyun Sea seemed to shake. Like beacons being lit one after another, one underwater volcano after another erupted, starting from the Tianyang cave. In this world-annihilating scene, the roar of the puppets could overpower the eruption of the underwater volcanoes. Yang's soul. Not weaker than man. A puppet that had been buried in the Earth's veins for thousands of years, constantly absorbing the energy of the Earth's core, and tempering itself. It tore apart the numerous mountains under the sea and stood up in the Kongyun Sea. Defying the heavens, it roared with pride. Chapter 103. The Battle of Soul Transformation. The black clouds from the underwater volcanic eruption reached the sky, and countless red-hot stones streaked through the sky, splashing in all directions. As the Tianyong puppet stood firm in the sea, it turned slightly, and its eyes emitted a sinister red light. It headed in the direction of 10,000 Immortals Island, taking giant strides. Boom! With each step, it caused massive waves to rise 100 meters high. Despite appearing slow, it was incredibly fast, rapidly closing in on 10,000 Immortals Island. Along the way, the tsunamis generated by its movements destroyed countless islands. Suddenly, the Tianyong puppet's colossal body came to a halt. The sky had abruptly darkened. The Tianyong puppet gazed up, and above it, a massive mountain hung suspended in the air, several times larger than itself. The mountain's bulk nearly occupied its entire field of vision, with glimpses of flora and fauna on its surface. "Fellow Taoist, please stop." A cold, slightly murderous voice echoed through the sky. The mountain descended, pressing down toward the Tianyong puppet. The Tianyong puppet's face displayed defiance, and it roared angrily. Its arms reached out. They collided with the descending mountain. A shockwave erupted from their point of impact. Li Fan and Zhang Haobo, who were watching from a distance, were swept up by this shockwave, their bodies nearly uncontrollable like leaves in the wind. Both of them had astonished expressions on their faces. Shortly afterward, a series of explosions were heard. Boom, 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 ... Li Fan and Zhang Haobo focused on the descending mountain, where the Tianyong puppet's waist began to bend under the pressure. Its feet were directly embedded in the seabed, producing a continuous booming sound of impact. Tian. The red light on the puppet's body grew more intense, brighter than the midday sun. Yang. The Tianyong puppet looked up at the mountain it was supporting, its eyes filled with madness and unwillingness. Creaking sounds continued as its hunched body gradually straightened. The massive mountain was slowly lifted into the air. HMPH. Seeing that the Tianyong puppet remained unyielding, another cold snort echoed through the heavens and earth. On the hanging mountain's peak, several mountain peaks of varying shapes began to emerge faintly. They formed a mysterious formation, exuding an immense aura. The weight of the descending mountain suddenly increased several times over. The lower part of the Tianyong puppet, under this immense pressure, was pushed into the sea. The surrounding seawater was pushed outward, creating a circle of massive waves that spread in all directions. The eroded seabed was exposed as the collision continued, and the puppet's lower limbs were crushed bit by bit. Soon, only the upper half of the Tianyong puppet remained, desperately struggling to support itself. It seemed that the defeat was imminent. Soul. Not weaker than humans. He continued to repeat these words, but after a few repetitions, the Tianyong puppet's head was all that remained. At the base of the suspended mountain, it opened its eyes wide. Not weaker than humans. Its head suddenly exploded, transforming into molten lava. Deep beneath the Kongyun Sea, the subterranean fires erupted once more. The countless magma and molten lava formed by the Tianyong puppet gathered together, creating a fiery figure. This reconstituted Tianyong puppet, with flames surging and roiling on its body, resembled a fire dragon as it charged head-on toward the hanging mountain. Boom! The molten dragon burrowed through the base of the mountain. Amid continuous explosions, cracks appeared one after another in the hanging mountain. Finally, the fire dragon burst out from the bottom of the mountain, roaring into the sky. After a moment, it transformed back into a human form. Coldly gazing down at the shattered hanging mountain. Boom, 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 ... The colossal hanging mountain exploded into pieces. Countless fragments fell like meteorites onto the black, lava-cooled seabed. Quite interesting. He truly lives up to being an heir of an ancient body transformation technique. The voice from the heavens and earth sounded once again, lacking the expected rage and instead filled with curiosity. With the foundation of a golden core, he has achieved such power after thousands of years. Above the Tianyong puppet, the illusory mountain peaks became more substantial. As if provoked by the words, with the foundation of a golden core, the Tianyong puppet, not willing to be outdone, roared again and confronted the illusory mountain peaks. If you want to fight, let's change the location. At this moment, a lazy female voice rang out. The world suddenly darkened. Li Fan and Zhang Haobo looked up, only to realize that the sun had disappeared from the sky. It was as though a large hole had been torn in the sky, revealing a starry night. The starlight fell lightly, landing on the Tianyong puppet. Roar! The puppet could only let out an angry roar before its massive form vanished. Good. Let's change the location and fight properly. The illusory mountain peaks also disappeared. The ruptured sky gradually closed, and the stars began to vanish one by one. The sun shone brightly, and the world remained serene and peaceful. Only the nearly shattered fragments of the Kongyun Sea in the vicinity bore witness to the earth-shattering battle that had just occurred. The two figures that appeared just now should be the soul transformation stage cultivators staged on the 10,000 Immortals Island. Their demeanor is truly awe-inspiring. It's something to aspire to. Li Fan saw a soul transformation expert in action for the first time, and he couldn't help but feel his heart pounding with excitement. When he came back to his senses and looked at Zhang Haobo, the latter was also lost in thought. His face displayed a long-lasting sense of amazement. It seems that the illusory realm created by the Cloud-Water illusory dream art cannot compare to a first-hand experience. Otherwise, after witnessing the burning ocean, one wouldn't be so intimidated by the soul transformation battle, Li Fan pondered. He released the insect binding technique and asked, "How are you feeling, fellow Taoist Zhang?" Startled, Zhang Haobo awakened from his daze. He instantly activated the spiritual energy within him, and the 24C fixing swords appeared around him in an instant. Li Fan tilted his head, looking at him. Realizing what he had done, Zhang Haobo's aura stagnated, and he retracted his blue water sword. With a somewhat embarrassed smile, he scratched his head and bowed respectfully to Li Fan. He said seriously, "Thank you, fellow Taoist, for saving my life." Li Fan chuckled and waved his hand. "It's a trivial matter. Fellow Taoist Zhang, with your mid-chi condensation stage cultivation, you were able to confront 17 puppets on your own. The way you controlled water swords to suppress all the puppets was truly impressive." Zhang Haobo hastily shook his head. "I can't compare to your divine abilities." Then, he looked up at the sky with a somewhat melancholic expression. "Originally, in just a little over a year, I rose from an ordinary mortal to the mid-chi condensation stage. I was a bit self-satisfied. But today, after seeing true experts in action, I realized. In their eyes, someone in the chi condensation stage is no different from an ant." Li Fan comforted him. "Fellow Taoist Zhang, there's no need to be disheartened. With your talent, given time, you may well become one of these experts." Chapter 104, Forgotten Catastrophes. Zhang Haobo forced a bitter smile and was about to say something when he suddenly stopped. After a moment, he spoke again. "I don't know your name yet. I dare not forget the favor you've done today. I'll repay it in the future." Li Fan smiled and did not answer. He just clasped his hands and said, "We'll meet again if fate allows." His figure turned into a thin line and quickly disappeared from view. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished from Zhang Haobo's sight. Zhang Haobo squinted. "Such incredible speed. That unknown technique is truly formidable if it can render me powerless. So mysterious, I wonder about the person's identity." After a while, he sighed and thought, "It's a pity that no matter how many secrets they have, it won't make much difference." Zhang Haobo tilted his head and looked up to the sky. "Heaven and earth have declared killing intent. The numerous beings in the Kongyun Sea, regardless of cultivation level or wealth, have long been destined for death. That red-colored figure that burned the sea. A nascent soul cultivator is already so powerful, is it really possible to defeat him?" Zhang Haobo was in a daze. However, after some time, his gaze gradually became more resolute. "No matter what, I will do my best to stop it." His resolve became solid once again, and he glanced at the ruins one last time before taking off. Not long after Zhang Haobo left, Li Fan's hidden figure reappeared. "It seems that he hasn't lost his fighting spirit. I was overly cautious," Li Fan nodded to himself. After some consideration, he carefully returned to the original location of the Tianyang cave. He wanted to see if any treasures had survived the recent battle. However, after searching for a while, all he found was the flowing lava and nothing else. He couldn't help but sigh in disappointment. "It's a shame. I wonder if I can reproduce the mountain meditation technique from the fragments." His thoughts were mixed as he returned to 10,000 Immortals Island. The location of the Tianyang cave had experienced a massive battle that day, and the news had obviously spread. Many cultivators were discussing the matter, but nobody knew what had really happened or how the towering puppet had appeared. Various opinions were expressed, but no one had the full story. Li Fan was certainly not going to share the details of the battle. However, while passing by the cultivators and engaging in casual conversations, he suddenly had a thought. Considering the recent events and the destructive power displayed during battles between powerful cultivators, they must have drawn a lot of attention. After such an event, people would discuss it, and the topic would naturally come up in conversation. However, when it comes to the killing intent of the heavens and earth to harm cultivators, there have had to be previous disasters. But, whether in the previous life or this one, the conversations I had with many chi condensation cultivators never involved any mentions of major disasters that occurred before the Kongyunsi. This thinking made me develop a sort of cognitive gap. So, when Zhang Haobo first mentioned that there might be a disaster approaching, I didn't pay much attention to it. In my understanding, if a place frequently experiences disasters, the residents would at least occasionally mention it in their conversations. And when outsiders arrive, they should be warned. So, since none of the cultivators here ever talked about any disaster, there wouldn't have been any particularly significant disasters in the past. Therefore, in his past life, he had merely made an inquiry to the Tianshuan mirror, and after receiving a negative answer, he quickly forgot about it. However, was the burning sea the first time the heavens and earth formed killing intent against the cultivators in the Kongyunsi? It was unlikely. Everything follows a gradual process. The heavens and the earth have malevolent intentions toward cultivators. As the number of cultivators within the Kongyunsi gradually increases, and their cultivation levels rise, the heavens and the earth will begin killing them off. At first, it should only be small-scale catastrophes. Only when the number of cultivators reaches a limit is a final removal plan initiated. The heavenly spirit appears, eradicating all living beings. Li Fan deduced this because the 10,000 Immortals alliance in the Kongyunsi had already developed to such a large scale. Would the murderous intent of the heavens and earth deliberately endure, waiting for cultivators to grow and silently bide their time? Would it only launch a devastating strike when it couldn't tolerate them anymore? With Li Fan's comprehension of the killing intent of the heavens and earth, it was obvious that this would not be the case. The killing intent of the heavens and earth would always exist as long as there were cultivators. In other words, in the past years, catastrophes must have been constantly recurring. So what exactly led to all cultivators keeping silent about these disasters? Did they actively avoid mentioning them, or were they forgotten? Li Fan immediately returned to the Tianshuan mirror and searched for keywords. Historical calamities, catastrophes, killing intent of the heavens and earth. The results sent shivers down Li Fan's spine. None. None, none, none. No matter how Li Fan searched, the Tianshuan mirror displayed no results. After a while, Li Fan calmed down and took out a communication talisman, asking, Yuan Xing. The response sent a chill down Li Fan's spine. Yuan Xing first denied any knowledge of previous catastrophes. Then, after repeated questions from Li Fan, he vaguely recalled that something might have happened, but he couldn't remember clearly. He didn't think it was very important and had already forgotten about it. Li Fan also asked several other older cultivators. They were puzzled as to why Li Fan was asking such questions, but their answers were all similar to Yuan Xing's. It seemed like something had happened, but they couldn't remember. Li Fan fell silent. Couldn't remember. Since when did Foundation establishment cultivators become so forgetful? Li Fan remembered his first encounter with a wind calamity when he arrived on Luli Island. Even the ordinary people on the island would tell him about the scene of a more massive wind calamity that occurred over a decade ago. Weren't cultivators supposed to have better memory than ordinary people? Remembering disasters should make people more vigilant and help them survive future calamities more easily. This was the proper reasoning. But in the world now, this reasoning seems to have been forgotten. Chapter 105, Paradise in Heaven and Earth. Against the reasoning of heaven and earth. Li Fan began to speak slowly but only muttered the second half in his heart. To attain immortality. Since entering the world of cultivation, Li Fan had witnessed nascent soul cultivators move mountains, and he had seen the Tao integration realm crimson flame burn the sea. However, none of these could compare to this moment, where he glimpsed the awe-inspiring existence of the immortal ancestor within various signs that defied common sense. Invisible and unnoticeable, this influence had an impact that was far more potent than mere destruction. I have only been unaffected by this power because the burning of the sea I remember belonged to a calamity that occurred in the future. Thus, I was able to perceive the influence of the immortal ancestor between the past and the present. After a while, Li Fan slowly dispelled the fear that had suddenly come over him, caused by the realization that he was constantly living under the shadow of this great entity. In the world of cultivation, Golden core stage cultivators were generally called lords, nascent soul stage cultivators were true lords, soul transformation stage cultivators were true monarchs, and those of the Tao integration realm were immortal sages. The highest level experts, such as the immortal ancestor, were referred to as the immortal venerables. The immortal venerables in the world were mostly elusive figures. Specific details like their names were generally unknown to ordinary cultivators. It seems that under the influence of the immortal ancestor, all the cultivators in the world will gradually forget the disasters they once experienced. Or, not just disasters, it seems that any collective memory that would bring pain is under his influence. It seems that this world of cultivation is a paradise. Li Fan pondered slowly, and at the same time, he began to realize. In this world, where the heavens and earth harbored so much malice toward cultivators and where the conflicts between immortals were so sharp, he had encountered cultivators like Ko Hong, Dao Xuanzi, He Zhenghao, and Yuan Xing, who almost completely ignored the malice of the heavens and earth. There were hardly any of the bitter or hateful types that would seek to destroy the heavens. They all intentionally or unintentionally overlooked the malicious intent of the heavens and earth. At most, they lamented the difficulty of the Tao of immortality and were even cheerful. It was highly probable that this was the work of that immortal ancestor. Was it for the sake of allowing cultivators throughout the world to cultivate better? Or did it serve some other purpose? Li Fan had always been inclined to assume the worst possible motives of others. Longevity was what Li Fan relentlessly pursued, the ultimate goal. But at this moment, he was still far from his objective. He had to stay grounded, steadily practicing step by step. After recovering from the shock brought by the immortal ancestor's influence, Li Fan began to search for information on the ancient body transformation Tao. It was not some closely guarded secret, so it was easy to find relevant information. The ancient body transformation Tao was not taught by a sect that specialized in mechanical techniques. Instead, its disciples all cultivated a special method known as mind-body transformation. They could place their mind, spirit, and thoughts onto external objects. Once these were placed, they could not only control the object but also fully synchronize with the sensations of the object. At the highest level of practice, they could abandon their own physical bodies and forever inhabit the object of their choosing. The reason why it was so easy to find relevant information was not that this method was particularly powerful. It was because, in the Tianquan Mirror, there were indeed many, splendid articles, that described male and female cultivators utilizing the ancient body transformation Tao to engage in intimate activities with various peculiar objects. The variety of methods made Li Fan marvel. After browsing for a while, Li Fan shook his head and closed it. From this perspective, Lord Tianyong probably planted the puppet in the depths of the sea's volcanic veins before his death and set up an arrangement. In the end, his soul and thoughts were placed in the puppet. Over thousands of years, the puppet incessantly absorbed the geothermal energy to grow. Meanwhile, Lord Tianyong, once a mere golden core stage cultivator, turned into a formidable existence capable of fighting a true monarch. Although it seems that he has lost his consciousness now and can only act instinctively. But he probably has no regrets. Throughout his life, Lord Tianyong was no less than a person. At the very least, the statement, Tianyang's soul isn't weak, isn't too far-fetched. After reflecting on these matters, Li Fan began his closed-door cultivation. Observing the battle of the soul transformation realm had given him some insights. He believed that he was not far from breaking through his current bottleneck. As he had anticipated, it was indeed the case. Like water flowing to its destined course, 5 days later, Li Fan felt that the spiritual energy within his body had reached saturation. Both the Jade Cosmos Thousand Variations Sutra and the Sun-Stealing Technique had reached the late Qi condensation stage simultaneously. He had made no progress. However, what pleasantly surprised Li Fan was that as soon as he touched the bottleneck this time, he faintly sensed the location of his opportunity. Moreover, the path ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with danger and full of surprises. After some preparations, Li Fan was about to set off. But before he could leave, a profound insight suddenly surged into his mind. It was the Li Fan's clone who had been in seclusion for a long time, finally emerging. With 2 pieces of good news in a row, everything seemed to be going well. It made Li Fan feel like the heavens and the earth were on his side. After calming down, Li Fan carefully pondered the abilities that the clone had comprehended this time. All things in the world were interconnected, linked in a chain from life to death, controlled by the butterfly effect. What Li Fan had comprehended, the life and death chain, could be described as an upgraded version of the formless killing intent. By selecting a predetermined individual as the target of death, he could backtrack through countless connections and sense the weakest and most fatal life chain. By severing this vital connection, he could subtly drive the predetermined target towards death, unnoticed by either gods or ghosts. The formless killing intent required the target to be locked onto. The target's strength could not surpass Li Fan too much, or else he would suffer a backlash. And there was also the risk of being detected by the target. In contrast, the life and death chain was different. It only required knowledge of the target's existence. It could almost ignore the difference in cultivation realms between them. With sufficient information, even in the qi condensation stage, Li Fan could eliminate a nascent soul stage cultivator. Take the case of the Tianyang cave as an example. If Li Fan wanted to assassinate a nascent soul true lord, he wouldn't have to take action himself. He would only need to trigger the life and death chain, retrace back through all possibilities of connections between him and the Tianyang cave. From there, he would find the most suitable path. He would subtly influence the nascent soul true lord to have the idea of exploring the Tianyang cave. As a result, the true lord would perish within the cave. While the life and death chain was powerful, it also had certain conditions for activation. It was necessary to determine the death chain in advance. This meant that Li Fan needed to determine how the target would die before he could backtrack. Moreover, this method of death had to be effective. For example, if Li Fan decided that the nascent soul true lord would accidentally lose control of his spiritual energy and fall from the sky during flight, leading to his death. Indeed, such an outcome was possible. However, the complexity of the required reverse derivation to bring about this result was beyond Li Fan's current capabilities. As a result, the life and death chain could not be activated. Chapter 106. Li Fan's sudden enlightenment. However, if it is said reasonably, say, the nascent soul true lord was on a flight and encountered an enemy on the way. After a fierce battle, he was defeated and died. In this way, after activating the life and death chain, it would be possible to trace the conditions under which these two enemies met. Although it might take a long time for calculations, it would eventually succeed. In summary, the more abundant the information, especially about the death link, the easier it would be to activate the life and death chain. And Li Fan was fortunate enough to fully utilize the advantage of foresight through truth. Therefore, transcending the qi condensation stage to kill nascent soul true lords would become a feasible task. For example, Li Fan could lure a targeted nascent soul true lord into the Kong Yun Sea during the burning of the sea. By harnessing the power of the crimson flame, he could assassinate the nascent soul true lord. Identify the cause and effect, and kill without a trace. Li Fan couldn't help but exclaim, "What a fantastic ability!" What surprised Li Fan even more was that, besides the life and death chain, his doppelganger had also experienced another revelation, the heavenly sight, earthly hearing technique, which incorporated various insights Li Fan had about qi and destiny, elevating the life and death chain to a whole new level. The fate of all things was under the watchful eye of heaven and earth. By observing the intertwining of qi fluctuations and fate, one could perceive them from the perspective of heaven and earth. In simpler terms, while the previous formless killing intent could only vaguely lock onto the target's position, now, after comprehending the vision of heaven and earth, one could observe the target through the perspective of heaven and earth. After figuring out the function of the vision of heaven and earth, Li Fan was really overjoyed this time. Even with his state of mind, he could not help but be secretly excited. The surprises came one after another, even causing Li Fan to be a bit terrified. He experimented with the vision of heaven and earth technique. His mind settled down, sensing the formless killing intent that was locked onto Zhang Haobo. A picture appeared in Li Fan's mind. On top of the blue waves, Zhang Haobo stood in the void. 24 increasingly blue water swords were flying around him, forming some sort of arcane formation. Like the stars of the circumference, they were constantly moving. Water dragons were born in the water sword formation as it transformed. Zhang Haobo pointed towards the sea in front of him, and the water dragons in the formation then flew out, dancing wildly in the sky. Explode! Zhang Haobo gave a low shout, and the group of water dragons exploded. Each of the water dragons disintegrated into countless tiny water swords. In an instant, the water swords were like a raging wind and rain, blasting into a large area in front of Zhang Haobo. The surface of the sea was suddenly startled by countless water columns, which was spectacular. And Zhang Haobo was tireless as the stars of blue light flew into his body. He began to test the move once again. Li Fan was almost mesmerized as he watched. Because, with the perspective of heaven and earth, he saw more than just the scene on the surface. The root of the aura in Zhang Haobo's body, the flow of the aura in each move, and even the method of operation of this strengthened version of the water dragon breathing formation were all unreservedly and clearly displayed in front of him. Although there was still a considerable gap between watching and mastering, seeing so much would surely lead to understanding. In the blink of an eye, a flash of enlightenment pierced Li Fan's mind. In the midst of his excitement, he exited the state of vision of heaven and earth, and stood up. He couldn't help but shout, "Today, I finally understand my path." What was Li Fan's path? Since the beginning of his cultivation, there had always been a question lingering in his mind. His innate talent was not great, and even expelling the miasma and condensing chi was quite challenging. The later stages, such as foundation establishment, golden core, and even the path to nascent soul and beyond would certainly become increasingly perilous. In the world, geniuses were abundant, some possessing astonishing comprehension abilities. They could easily comprehend various techniques and divine abilities. Li Fan had wondered what he could use to compete with those exceptional individuals. If one day the gap between the two realms became too vast, even if he restarted endlessly, he might never break through. What would he do then? Today, Li Fan had finally found his answer. A unique path that belonged to him alone, impossible for others to replicate. Truth Mountain Meditation Technique, Vision of Heaven and Earth. No matter how high their innate talent is, they are always under my gaze. Their lifetime of understanding belongs to me. Li Fan gradually calmed his emotions and sat back down, speaking softly, "Even though there are many heroes in the world, they must all end up under my command." Heroes were like carp swimming across a river, emerging year after year. Li Fan's path was to select the most outstanding among them. Gathering the best of the talented individuals and using them as pawns, he would derive extraordinary techniques from them. He would gather the strengths of thousands and innovate further, forging his unique path. The path is now established, the next step is to see how to arrange it. Li Fan stated his path. At the same time, his doppelganger, Fan Lin, felt elated. Another wave of insight was transmitted, but it wasn't about a divine ability, it was information perceived during the enlightenment. Through this enlightenment, Fan Lin understood that the previous cultivation world that existed before the Great Calamity had placed immense importance on enlightenment. Ancient cultivation emphasized comprehending the ways of the heavens. Some mortals could have sudden insights, advancing from chi condensation to foundation establishment in a single day, reaching golden core in 3 days, and forming the nascent soul in 5 days. There were even cases of people meditating for 100 years, having a sudden revelation, and ascending to immortality in 1 step. However, such individuals were exceedingly rare, with only a handful throughout the history of cultivation. Most people would use enlightenment to improve slightly within a lower realm or gain insight into certain divine abilities. Nowadays, very few can achieve enlightenment. Peering into the laws of heaven and earth, seizing the essence of heaven and earth, and extracting the marrow of heaven and earth. If heaven doesn't give it to me, I'll take it myself. The Tao of enlightenment, the Tao of plundering heaven, but what is my Tao? Li Fan muttered. After comprehending these 2 divine abilities, Li Fan spent half a month consolidating his insights within the Tianshuan mirror. Afterward, he decided to set off in search of an opportunity to break through the bottleneck. After comparing the location in his mind with the Kong Yun Sea's map, he realized that the place he had to go to this time was a peculiar island called Yin Island. The island earned its strange name because it was devoid of ordinary people. Instead, it was inhabited solely by a cultivator known as Master Yin. Master Yin's cultivation level was not high, he was only at the foundation establishment stage. However, he wasn't very interested in cultivation and preferred to study various eccentric things. Among the objects of his research, the most famous was the Immortal miasma. The experiment which involved extracting the Immortal miasma from Su Chengyu's body and led to his death was his work. Due to this, many cultivators didn't hold him in high regard and preferred not to associate with him. So, he moved to a remote small island, where he could enjoy the peace and quiet. How could the opportunity for his breakthrough be related to this person? Li Fan was somewhat curious and immediately set out for Yin Island. Chapter 107. six-headed monstrosity. Yin Yin Island is located in the northeastern corner of the Kongyun Sea. It took Li Fan over 20 days to arrive in the vicinity. The island is not large and lacks any significant vegetation. There's a square building standing on the island. From a distance, you can faintly hear the cries of human suffering carried by the sea breeze. Master Yin Yin, are you here? Li Fan shouted loudly. His voice spread across the entire island but received no response. Li Fan patiently asked again, but all that echoed back was the mournful sea wind. He asked one more time, still without a reply. After pondering for a while, Li Fan felt that he was indeed in the right place for his opportunity. With caution, he descended to the square building on the island. The building appeared to be constructed from a dark blue stone-like material, and apart from a large entrance, it had no other doors or windows. The interior of the building was shrouded in darkness, so dark that it seemed to devour both light and divine perception. It was impossible to discern what was inside. Only the intermittent cries emanated from within. The place seemed eerie, and Li Fan had to be on high alert as he advanced. Just as he was about to enter, he heard hurried footsteps approaching. A small creature, like a little dog, sprinted out from inside the building, heading straight for Li Fan. Thinking it was some kind of magical beast attack, Li Fan was about to strike it down. However, when his divine perception scanned it, he realized it was just an ordinary creature. Not wanting to harm a pet from the owner of the house he was visiting, Li Fan extended his hand, picked it up by the neck, and set it aside. The creature was taken by surprise, whimpering in fear and trembling. With a thud, the item it had been carrying in its mouth dropped to the ground. Examining the small creature closely, Li Fan couldn't help but shiver. It resembled a dog but had hands like those of a human. On the belly of the dog's body, 5 or 6 eye-like objects were moving about, blinking and gazing fixedly at Li Fan. What in the world is this? Suppressing the urge to throw it away, Li Fan placed the creature behind him and proceeded cautiously into the darkness. After a moment, when his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Li Fan observed an unexpected scene. Contrary to his imagination of a horrifying and eerie place, the interior was quite clean. The ground was spotless, with no signs of blood. Scattered throughout the area were numerous transparent cages containing various bizarre creatures. They all appeared strange and were lying passively in their cages, displaying no signs of aggression. It seemed that these cages were only transparent one way, as those inside couldn't see out. Among these odd creatures, there were giant pythons with 2 heads that were entangled with each other, a creature resembling a large disc covered in squirming, wriggling maggots, and a being that appeared to be a fusion of 2 different species, a goat-headed turtle. What most unsettled Li Fan was a monstrosity with 6 human heads joined together. 2 arms grew out of the top of each head, which held another head, and so on, while the lowest head had 2 tiny hands on the bottom as well. This 6-headed monstrosity had a vertical body posture, similar to a giant insect, and it crawled within the cage. During its movements, all 6 heads faced different directions, with blank, pale faces showing no emotions. Li Fan hadn't encountered such a disgusting creature even in his most horrifying nightmares. Suppressing the discomfort he felt, he took just a brief look and hurriedly walked past it. I must find you, I must find you. Listening carefully, deep within the building, there seemed to be a low, murmured repetition. Li Fan followed the voice and arrived at a massive rectangular transparent cage. On either side were 4 small adjoining cages connected to this large rectangular one. Each small cage contained a mortal with peculiar devices attached to their bodies. It appeared as though something was moving inside them, causing visible protrusions to move rapidly across their bodies. With each movement of these protrusions, their flesh and blood rapidly decayed. However, as the protrusions shifted, some slowly regenerated, while others worsened. In an instant, a black abyss formed, revealing the white bones inside. The experiences of these mortals were no less cruel than the most gruesome of executions. They writhed and cried out in agony. Some were left lifeless, reduced to mere piles of flesh and blood, still twitching uncontrollably. At the front of the large rectangular transparent cage stood a figure. Li Fan gazed at the individual, whose hair was somewhat disheveled, streaked with black and white. His clothes were ragged and unkempt as if they hadn't been changed for many years. I must find you, I must find you. The figure, as if possessed, stared intently at the transparent cage in front, continuously muttering under his breath. Master Yin Yin, the individual had the cultivation of foundation establishment, and there was no one else around. Li Fan, maintaining some distance, called out. However, the figure showed no response, as if completely oblivious. Woof, woof, woof. Suddenly, the small dog-like creature that Li Fan was holding began to struggle and roar, seemingly seeking help from its master. Awoken by the dog's barking, the figure, Master Yin Yin, turned abruptly. Gazing at Li Fan, he suddenly realized, oh, there's a guest. Oh, there's a guest. ... Two voices, one after the other, echoed within the figure as if reverberating within, and then they were projected outward. Li Fan's eyelid twitched. He released the dog and greeted with a bow, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Once the small dog touched the ground, it rushed to Yin Yin's feet, eagerly seeking affection. Yin Yin tidied his messy hair and seemed somewhat embarrassed. I was deeply engrossed in my thoughts and didn't hear the calls of fellow Taoist. Please forgive me. The two voices, oddly one after another, sounded as Yin Yin addressed Li Fan warmly. This isn't a suitable place for conversation. Please, this way, fellow cultivator. Saying so, Yin Yin opened a door beside them, revealing an entrance to another room. The small dog barked happily and followed suit. Leading the way ahead, Yin Yin suddenly recalled something and turned back to say to Li Fan, by the way, my name isn't Yin Yin. My name is Yin. My name is Yin. ... But two voices, one after another, resounded again, sounding just like Yin Yin. So that's how it is, Li Fan suddenly realized. Perhaps when the Kong Yun Si cultivators referred to him as Yin Yin, it wasn't without a hint of mockery. Greetings, fellow Taoist Yin. Li Fan greeted again. Recognizing that his name had been called correctly, Master Yin was extremely pleased. Chapter 108. A Single Rib. Beyond the small door, there were many exhibits. Master Yin Yin enthusiastically introduced them to Li Fan. This is a bone from the Vedic fish. This species went extinct 3,500 years ago. It took quite an effort to collect this bone. It is said that the Vedic fish was exceptionally intelligent and could mimic human speech. Eating its flesh allowed people to understand the language of fish. Who knows if that's true? They continued to a gigantic serpent that was lifelike, winding and stretching for over a kilometer. Master Yin Yin excitedly said, "This is a Kong Yun sea serpent. Normally, they hide in the deep sea, burying themselves in the soil. I had to run across a large part of the Kong Yun Sea to catch one this long. Preparing it as a specimen was no small feat." Then, Master Yin Yin spoke mysteriously, "Based on my research, these sea serpents are not the true body. They harbor a mysterious parasitic creature inside them, a minuscule parasite that is extremely hard to detect, even by Foundation establishment stage mental power. However, it's this tiny parasite that controls the gigantic sea serpent. It's truly unimaginable." As they moved forward, the wide array of exhibits widened Li Fan's horizons. Both of them stopped in front of two human skeletons placed side by side. Master Yin Yin pointed to the two skeletons and asked with a hint of pride, "Fellow Taoist, do you notice anything different about these two human skeletons?" Different. Li Fan swept his mental power over them and, at first glance, they seemed like ordinary human remains. Both skeletons were of men, only varying in size. But to ask if there was any essential difference. Li Fan gazed at them for a while, then shook his head, saying, "I apologize, but I cannot see any differences." Master Yin Yin chuckled, "Don't worry, I bet no other could perceive the differences between these two skeletons within the Kong Yun Sea except for me." Pointing at the two skeletons, Master Yin Yin moved closer to Li Fan, speaking in an extremely hushed tone, "These two individuals are not of the same kind of people." "Not of the same kind?" Li Fan was taken aback. "What do you mean?" Master Yin Yin gestured with his hands for a while, brooding, as if he couldn't find suitable words to describe the situation. After a long while of contemplation, Master Yin Yin suddenly clenched his fist, his face filled with confusion. "It's just a feeling, you know. Clearly, they're both humans, but these two humans lived in different eras and regions. Perhaps they look almost identical, and both were dug out from the depths of the Kong Yun Sea by me, but there's a profoundly unique boundary that distinguishes these two sets of remains." Master Yin Yin's words were cryptic, and he couldn't explain further. Nor did he dwell on it, continuing forward. They stopped in front of an empty display stand. Master Yin Yin pointed to the vacant stand, his face pale, and his fingers trembling uncontrollably. He tried to say something, but his lips moved without uttering a word. My treasure," Master Yin Yin exclaimed in a panic. The small dog following behind him whimpered, ears drooping. It secretly glanced upward and quickly crouched at Master Yin Yin's feet, trembling. Seeing this, Li Fan realized something. Therefore, he asked tentatively, "Fellow Taoist Master Yin Yin, when you mention your treasure, you're not referring to a bone, are you?" Master Yin Yin was overjoyed and nodded repeatedly, "Yes, have you seen it?" Li Fan looked peculiar, then led Master Yin Yin back to the entrance of the rectangular building. Upon their arrival, the little human dog rammed into Li Fan. The object it had in its mouth fell to the ground. At that time, Li Fan glanced at it, thinking it was just a toy for the human dog, so he didn't bother to pick it up. However, he didn't expect that this bone was actually Master Yin Yin's treasure. Master Yin Yin carefully picked up the bone, wiping away the saliva on it, and looked at it with affection and tenderness, as if he were gazing at a lover in a dream. The way he behaved gave Li Fan goosebumps. Li Fan cleared his throat, trying to awaken Master Yin Yin from his trance. He couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Master Yin Yin, may I inquire about the origin of this bone that you hold in such high regard?" Master Yin Yin gripped the bone in his hand, as if he were afraid of losing it again. He gazed at the bone and replied somewhat absent-mindedly, "Oh, this is an extraordinary treasure. I'm willing to part with all my other collections, but it's even more valuable than my life." Li Fan felt a chill as he listened. He became curious and gazed at Master Yin Yin inquiringly. "I'm sure you've heard of the immortal mortal miasma, fellow Taoist," Master Yin Yin began. At first, the immortal mortal miasma only spread among ordinary humans and had no impact on his cultivators. Later, an immortal cultivator, for no apparent reason, got infected, and it began spreading among his cultivators. Li Fan looked at the bone in Master Yin Yin's hand. "Are you saying?" "Yes, this rib bone belonged to the unfortunate first cultivator who got infected by the immortal mortal miasma." Master Yin Yin smiled foolishly and fondly caressed the rib bone. However, he saw that Li Fan remained unexcited. He couldn't help but feel surprised. "How are you so unfazed by such a treasure? Don't you understand its importance?" Li Fan shook his head repeatedly. "It's a pity fellow Taoist cannot see its value. The spread of immortal mortal miasma was one of the greatest events in history. Its effects on our world are only second to the great calamity itself. How could a mere plague from common people infect immortal cultivators? If we could understand the source of this anomaly, maybe we could eliminate the immortal mortal miasma at its root. By then, I would be a prominent figure who will be remembered throughout the entire world of immortal cultivation." Master Yin Yin was momentarily lost in his own fantasies. After a while, seeing Li Fan's continued indifference, he sighed deeply, as if lamenting Li Fan's ignorance. "You might not know that each bone of this Su something. What was his name? Either way, each of his bones is invaluable, with countless cultivators competing to obtain them. I'm extremely lucky to have been able to seize this rib bone. Of course, the most treasure one is his complete skull, stored in the headquarters of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance." Master Yin Yin indulged in his fantasies, and his mouth nearly watered. Li Fan couldn't understand this strange fascination and could only shake his head repeatedly. At this moment, Master Yin Yin suddenly reacted, "Wait. I still don't know the purpose of your sudden visit. What brings you here?" Chapter 109. All transform into heavenly treasures. After returning to the depths of the building and finding a place to sit, Li Fan explained his purpose to Master Yin. "Oh, you want to know how to break through to the foundation establishment stage?" Master Yin suddenly became excited, and he began to explain energetically. "You've asked the right person. I dare say, no one understands foundation establishment better than I do." "Please, tell me more," Li Fan replied with a smile, not disputing Master Yin's claim. At that moment, the human hand dog walked over on its hind legs, carrying 2 cups, which it placed on the table. The cups contained a dark, viscous liquid, and it was unknown what was inside. The human hand dog then crouched down, continuously circling around Master Yin to seek praise. "Please, have some tea," Master Yin said to Li Fan while taking a sip. "This is a valuable brew, cultivated from a spiritual bacterial colony. When consumed, it multiples rapidly and enters symbiosis with the body, which can accelerate the circulation of spiritual energy in your body and enhance the power of your spiritual energy. It has many benefits. Li Fan scanned the cup with his divine sense and saw countless tiny microorganisms inside, each with unique appearances. He chose not to drink it and remained still. Seeing Li Fan's reluctance to drink, Master Yin felt somewhat disappointed. Without insisting, he continued the conversation, asking, "Do you know exactly what establishing the foundation means?" Li Fan replied, "The so-called foundation establishment stage is exactly what the name implies. After a qi condensation cultivator reaches perfection, they need to establish their own foundation to continue their cultivation. Otherwise, even if their cultivation continues to increase, it's like building a 100-foot tall building on top of sand. A gentle shake, and it will collapse." When discussing academic matters, Master Yin appeared quite serious. He nodded and said, "That's right. Before the Great Calamity, there were some qi condensation cultivators who took a different path and chose not to establish their foundations. They focused solely on refining their qi. They claimed that there was no limit to refining qi, and that this path could eventually reach Tao integration. However, they couldn't progress beyond the 99th layer of qi condensation. In the end, a golden core cultivator couldn't stand the sight and casually killed them. Perhaps their path was indeed feasible, but qi condensation cultivators have weak bodies and can't withstand such powerful forces. Second, even with more layers of qi condensation, it only results in physical strength. When it comes to fighting against foundation establishment or even higher-level cultivators, they face many disadvantages." Master Yin took a sip of tea and continued, "Ancient cultivators followed the principle of learning from nature, observing the laws and rules of the heavens and the earth and comprehending the principles of the heavenly Tao. Then, by combining their personal insights and self-pondering, they formed the foundation of their future cultivation by making crude imitations. However, everyone's aptitude varies, and their comprehension abilities differ. The speed and compatibility with which they establish their foundations also vary greatly. Some individuals can experience a moment of enlightenment and immediately establish their foundations. But for the vast majority, it takes decades or even centuries of white hair and deep learning with no progress. Cultivation is undoubtedly difficult to achieve." Master Yin sighed suddenly, "But that was the past. If we liken the rules of heaven and earth to a towering tree, then in the past, we cultivators were like tiny fairies residing among its branches, observing and learning from the leaves. It was too slow and too difficult. So, after the immortal ancestor passed down his teachings, we cultivators turned into greedy ants. We no longer cared about observing, learning, or emulating. We directly nibbled at the tree's branches and leaves, turning them into our sustenance. By doing so, our cultivation speed increased by countless times. Heavenly treasures are like the branches and leaves of this great tree. Each heavenly treasure is the aggregation of the laws of heaven and earth in a particular aspect. Cultivators use these miraculous items as their foundation treasure and can bypass the process of self-comprehension, immediately forming their own foundation." Li Fan nodded and said, "I remember, Treatise on Heavenly Treasures, mentioning something similar." "Treatise on Heavenly Treasures," Master Yin sneered with a touch of disdain. He continued, "If we are to say that foundation treasures are used to bypass the process of comprehending the heavens and the earth, then let me ask you this. Nowadays, there are cultivators with exceptional talents who don't need foundation treasures to comprehend these laws. Their profound understanding of the heavens and the earth would allow them to directly establish their foundation during ancient times. Can they still do it now?" Master Yin looked intently at Li Fan. "Of course not. Establishing a foundation requires foundation treasures." Li Fan began to speak but suddenly fell silent, as if he had remembered something. "That's right. The way of cultivation has been completely changed," Master Yin said coldly. "In the past, cultivators comprehended the laws of the heavens and the earth, following the natural order. But after the immortal ancestor passed down his teachings, this natural order was reversed. Cultivators now have to go against the heavens, plundering the heavens and earth." Li Fan whispered, "Plunder the heavens and earth. In order to attain immortality." Master Yin continued, "I don't know how cultivators attained immortality before the Great Calamity. But ever since the method of cultivation was changed, the only path to immortality is by going against the order of heaven and earth. The original founder of this teaching, the immortal ancestor, was the first to propose the theory and also the first to practice it. He defied all conventional principles of cultivation and attained immortality. From that moment on, he shared the same lifespan as the heavens and the earth, living freely. Since then, all cultivators have no choice but to follow his methods in their cultivation." "How overbearing." Master Yin's tone was intense, clearly dissatisfied with this immortal ancestor who passed down the new way of cultivation. Going your own path and then making all living beings follow that same path. How incredible. Li Fan mused, deeply moved. He thought of the giant statue of an elderly man wearing a tall crown on the island of the 10,000 immortals. Majestic and overlooking all living beings. Could it be that the 10,000 Immortals Alliance was founded by the immortal ancestor? But if this immortal ancestor is still alive, how could he have allowed the Crimson Flame to destroy the 10,000 Immortals Island a few years later? Li Fan was filled with doubt. Master Yin didn't pay attention to Li Fan and continued, the key issue now is that since foundation establishment requires foundation treasures. Then what are the heavenly treasures, exactly? You've read Treatise on Heavenly Treasures. You know that when cultivators fall, they are transformed by the heavens and the earth into heavenly treasures. Doesn't that mean that when cultivators are alive, they can also be seen as heavenly treasures that haven't been fully transformed yet? Master Yin spoke faster and faster, as if he wanted to share all the years of research that no one had paid attention to. The heavens and the earth are like a crucible, and the finished product is the formed heavenly treasures. But everything in the heavens and the earth can be seen as unformed heavenly treasures. Heavenly treasures are aggregations of rules, and aren't humans the same? The human body is so intricate, containing endless mysteries. Why can't it be seen as a heavenly treasure? Do you also know that some cultivators will refine ordinary people with extraordinary abilities into heavenly treasures to use them as their foundation? In this way, the abilities of those ordinary people become their own. I am also a human, so am I a heavenly treasure? Seeing Master Yin's increasingly absurd statements, Li Fan couldn't help but ask, is this your speculation, or? Master Yin grinned and said, it used to be a speculation, but now I've confirmed it. With that, his entire body split along the center line, and another face of Master Yin emerged from within. 10 years ago, I used myself as a heavenly treasure to establish my foundation. Both faces, inside and outside, spoke in unison. Chapter 110. Building the Foundation with Myself. No wonder Master Yin had two voices when he spoke, one normally and another echoing. It turned out that he had another, him, inside his body. This eerie scene left Li Fan astonished. Fortunately, Master Yin seemed to realize that his original appearance was somewhat terrifying. After only displaying it briefly, he closed his body again and returned to his original form. He continued, I used myself as an experiment to confirm my hypothesis. Anything existing in the world can be seen as unformed, heavenly treasures. I call this process, heavenly transformation. However, if you want to establish your foundation with unformed, heavenly treasures, you need to complete the uncompleted, heavenly transformation process yourself. This is extremely difficult. Once you fail, it might lead to instant death. Even if you barely survive, your body will undergo various bizarre changes. Just like my current appearance. Master Yin grinned. Li Fan couldn't help but ask, didn't you say you successfully built your foundation? I did succeed, but not completely. I still didn't fully understand myself, which caused me to fail at the final moment of establishing the foundation, Master Yin regretfully replied. If I had a few more chances. No, just one more chance would suffice. I'm certain I could achieve a perfect, self-foundation. Self-foundation, Li Fan's curiosity was piqued. What if you succeeded in establishing the foundation with yourself? Master Yin's eyes lit up. That's equivalent to harnessing the power of the heaven and earth's furnace to reshape your body. And this body would be the most perfect constitution one could imagine. The most suitable heavenly treasure is the best foundation treasure. Nowadays, when cultivators establish their foundations, they often need to find heavenly treasures that are compatible with themselves to maximize the object's power. But, no matter the level of heavenly treasures, not even the legendary, celestial treasure, they all pale in comparison to self-foundation. Think about it. What's better suited to you than yourself? Your foundation perfectly aligns with yourself, and all cultivation and techniques become second nature. Seeing Master Yin getting more and more excited, Li Fan couldn't help but interrupt. Are these just your speculations? Master Yin hesitated, then shook his head. Although I only completed half of the self-foundation process, I can clearly feel that I've improved in various aspects compared to before. This includes my aptitude in cultivation, understanding of techniques, affinity with spiritual energy, and even the agility of my thoughts. It's beyond comparison to before. Li Fan wanted to know more and asked, so, how high is the success rate for self-foundation? Master Yin explained, I almost succeeded in one attempt, so the success rate must be quite high. You must believe me, my friend. I've dissected hundreds of foundation establishment cultivators' bodies, researching for decades to come to this conclusion. It can't be wrong. Li Fan replied, yes, I'll definitely give it a try. Wait, you mentioned that you've dissected hundreds of foundation cultivators' bodies. Master Yin thought for a moment, but then his gaze turned blank. From where did I obtain so many bodies? This is strange, I can't seem to recall. Li Fan had an idea and quickly said, it's not important. If you can't remember, just let it be. Master Yin nodded in agreement. You're right, thank you for clearing up my doubts. Now that my doubts are gone, I won't bother you any longer. Just now, when Li Fan heard Master Yin say that everything in the world can be seen as unformed, heavenly treasures, he had a sudden realization, and the bottleneck that had been plaguing him disappeared. As long as I have the heavenly treasures from heaven and earth in hand, I can immediately start establishing the foundation. Now that his purpose had been achieved, Li Fan had no desire to linger in this place any longer. Even though Master Yin might not necessarily have any ill intentions, the atmosphere in this place was uncomfortable. So, Li Fan chose to take his leave without hesitation. Master Yin tried to persuade him to stay, but Li Fan declined. Fellow Taoist, remember to give my self-foundation method a try. Before parting, Master Yin earnestly requested. Li Fan agreed multiple times, then took flight and left. For a long time, as he watched Li Fan's departing figure, Master Yin muttered, you must try it, I really wasn't lying. After a while, he fell into silence once again. He turned and returned to the enormous rectangular transparent cage. All the ordinary people in the four corners had turned into a puddle of flesh and blood, with none of them surviving. What a pity, not a single one made it through, he said with a hint of regret. There aren't many test subjects left. It looks like I'll have to go out again. In the four cages, the people who had turned into blood and flesh were removed with a creaking sound. A new batch of test subjects appeared in the cages. The agonizing wails began once more. Master Yin was already accustomed to this, his face showing no sign of strangeness. He stared intently at the rectangular transparent cage, holding the white rib in his hand tightly. In a tone that almost sounded pathological, he whispered, rest assured, I will avenge you. I will find the person who created the immortal mortal miasma and avenge you. ... I must find you, I must find you. Master Yin's murmurs echoed once more in this eerie building. ... 10,000 Immortals Island. Back in the heavenly profound mirror, Li Fan began searching for self-foundation. It was not considered a well-kept secret at all. All cultivators treated it as a joke and never believed it. Because anyone who believed in this would end up dead when trying to establish their foundation. Self-foundation, Li Fan naturally wouldn't fully believe the words of Master Yin. But at least there was one statement that seemed reasonable, everything in the world can be seen as unformed heavenly treasures. Li Fan believed that this statement should have no issues. Then naturally, he had to question the nature of his reincarnations. Is truth truly a heavenly treasure from heaven and earth? Could he use truth to establish his foundation? TL note. Chapter 111 was a short author note about them publishing officially and thanking their readers, which is why it was skipped. Chapter 112, Blue Wind. TL note. Chapter 111 was a short author note about them publishing officially and thanking their readers, which is why it was skipped. What exactly is truth? Since awakening to truth, this question has been deeply buried in Li Fan's heart. Was it an ability that awakened within himself as he traversed into this world, or was it a rare treasure hidden within his body? At certain moments, Li Fan couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. What if, one day, he suddenly lost truth? Or in a moment that required turning reality into an illusion, what if truth malfunctioned? When he first read Treatise on Heavenly Treasures, Li Fan had also doubted whether truth was a type of heavenly treasure from heaven and earth. Could he use it to build his foundation? Now, after hearing Master Yin's words, Li Fan was somewhat convinced that he could indeed use truth to build his foundation. However, not now. As his final trump card, Li Fan couldn't rashly attempt it without a certain degree of certainty. If building the foundation using truth was considered a problem to solve, Li Fan currently didn't even have the qualification to participate in the discussion. After all, he hadn't fully grasped what building the foundation entailed. Thankfully, in this era, most problems could be solved with money. Fan Lin started searching for knowledge related to building the foundation. The fundamentals of foundation establishment, heaven, earth, and humanity, and records of 100 individual foundations. One by one, relevant works were exchanged and read. Li Fan gradually gained a general understanding of foundation establishment. Use the devouring technique to ingest heavenly treasure into the Dantian. The roots of heaven and earth would take root there. Using heavenly treasures as the soil and nurturing them, absorbing the contained laws, and eventually cultivating the fruit called the foundation treasure. Heavenly treasures were divided into 3 categories: celestial treasures, earthly treasures, and human treasures. Among them, building the foundation with human treasures was the easiest. Human treasures were usually the remnants of fallen cultivators and contained the cultivators' understandings of the laws from their lifetime. In the process of building the foundation, it was akin to having a constant teacher guiding and instructing. On the other hand, earthly and celestial treasures were closer to the laws of the Great Tao. With no reference from other cultivators, it took more time and effort to comprehend the various rules within the heavenly treasures and convert them into one's own foundation treasure. However, the advantage of using heavenly treasures to build the foundation was that it could not fail. It was similar to when one condensed the roots of heaven and earth during a breakthrough in the chi refining stage, forcefully extracting spiritual energy. This method of building the foundation emphasized stability. If I were to compare pre-ancient calamity foundation establishment to a closed book exam, then today's foundation establishment would be an open book exam. The answers are right in front of you, and the difference lies in how quickly and accurately you can copy them, Li Fan contemplated silently. The rarer the heavenly treasure, the higher the difficulty of the exam. When the difficulty is so high that you can't even understand what the question is asking, let alone answer it, you have a problem. In that case, even if I want to use truth to build the foundation in the short term, it's practically impossible. But, if I gradually improve my understanding of the laws during successive foundation establishment attempts and then try it again, there might be a chance. As for self-foundation, 10 years in the past, I can let Master Yin try it for himself first. Li Fan made a plan for his future cultivation. Currently, his avatar was still present, but the remains of the deceased cultivators from the Tianyang cave had yet to be used. His avatar, Fan Lin, continued to explore the secrets within the Tianshuan mirror. He also exchanged and read some foundation establishment techniques, accumulating knowledge for the future integration of several techniques. As for his main body, Li Fan intended to wait until the Kanghai Pearl appeared to use it for foundation establishment. In his previous life, he had turned into the Kanghai Sea and comprehended the laws of heaven and earth through the consciousness of the Kongyun Sea. He had an extraordinary affinity with the Kanghai Pearl. Using it for foundation establishment would certainly yield great results. Now, about 13 years had already passed, and there were only about 7 or 8 years left until the appearance of the Kanghai Pearl. He could afford to wait. Furthermore, during this time, he could work on understanding the way of foundation establishment. He activated the formless killing intent and the vision of heaven and earth. The images in his mind gradually became clearer. In the midst of a raging storm, Zhang Haobo floated like a kite with a broken string, soaring with the wind. He didn't care about the turbulent waves or the raindrops pelting him, letting them strike him freely. Li Fan observed Zhang Haobo and noted, "It's been almost 3 months since I last saw him, and now he's in the later stages of qi condensation. His eyes are tightly closed, no signs of breathing, and his spiritual energy has fallen silent. What is he comprehending?" Li Fan also watched the storm raging around them. Perhaps it was an illusion, but in the dim and gloomy sky, a streak of blue light flashed briefly. What was that? When Li Fan looked again, he couldn't see it anymore. The brief glimpse of that astonishing sight seemed like a mere illusion. Blue. With the power of vision of heaven and earth, Li Fan didn't believe he was mistaken. He suddenly recalled the continuous wind disasters that had raged through the Kongyun Sea for years. He had previously searched for information about the wind disasters in the Tianshuan mirror, but it appeared that these wind disasters had little to no impact on cultivators. There were no records of them. Now, he understood that this was likely manipulated. Li Fan recalled that in his previous life, shortly before he arrived at Kongyun Sea, a massive wind disaster had occurred. Over 100 islands were destroyed. Over the following years, the scale and frequency of the wind disasters gradually diminished until the advent of the Crimson Flame. There might be some hidden secrets in this. It's just not the right time to investigate. Li Fan noted it in his mind. He shifted his attention back to Zhang Haobo, who was still in the midst of enlightenment. Li Fan couldn't discern anything, and the torrential storm seemed endless, with no sign of stopping. So, he had to keep a fraction of his attention on Zhang Haobo's situation. Most of his attention returned to the Tianxuan mirror. It's obviously not effective to focus on a single person. I need to cast a wider net. I haven't tried it yet, and the formless killing intent can at most lock onto a few individuals. I should find some cultivators who are about to build their foundations to conduct experiments. When it came to gathering information, Li Fan thought of Zhao Shuyuan. Although he was greedy and fearful, his information was usually reliable. Li Fan had been a regular customer of his for some time. Hiding his presence and taking a familiar route, Li Fan arrived outside Thousand Mile Hall. Before he could enter, he heard Zhao Shuyuan's voice from a distance. I've obtained all your stuff, so when are you coming to pick them up? I've reminded you several times, haven't I? Don't give me those ridiculous excuses that you can't come. I think you just don't want them. Hello, damn it. When Li Fan entered the room, he saw Zhao Shuyuan's frustrated expression as he slammed a small cauldron onto the table. Chapter 113, The Medicine King Sect from Ancient Times. Fellow Taoist Zhao, have you taken on another losing business? Li Fan teased. Upon seeing a guest, Zhao Shuyuan immediately changed his angry expression to a smile. However, when he heard Li Fan's taunt, his face darkened. He replied sheepishly, Fellow Taoist, you're mistaken. Zhao never engages in losing deals. Then, he muttered through gritted teeth, this brat dared to play me. He thinks I'm an easy target. Li Fan seemed to have heard Zhao Shuyuan say this more than once, so he just smiled without saying anything. Li Fan looked at the small cauldron on the table and asked, Fellow Taoist Zhao, what is this small cauldron? Zhao Shuyuan's eyes lit up, and he immediately gave an enthusiastic introduction. This small cauldron is quite extraordinary. I obtained it with great difficulty from the remnants of a ruined sect. Li Fan became interested and asked, Oh, what is the use of this small cauldron? Objects that have survived from ancient times are usually not ordinary. Do you know the famous Medicine King sect? Zhao Shuyuan asked mysteriously. I've never heard of it. Li Fan shook his head. Zhao Shuyuan's smile froze for a moment, but he was a professional and quickly provided an explanation to Li Fan. The Medicine King sect was one of the renowned sects from ancient times, known for their expertise in alchemy and herbal cultivation. It is said that after the immortal ancestor passed down his teachings but before the impending great calamity, the Medicine King sect's patriarch, Lu Rushan, had a premonition that a great change was coming to the world. As a result, Lu Rushan led the entire Medicine King sect, using his own Medicine King cauldron as their vessel, to break through the void and leave this world. Li Fan heard this story for the first time and inquired, break through the void. Where did they go? Zhao Shuyuan shrugged and said, it's a story from thousands of years ago. Who can really know for sure? They might have gone to the peripheral independent worlds, or they might have reached an entirely new world. In any case, that's not the key. The key is this cauldron. Li Fan nodded slightly, while his secondary self, Fan Lin, began searching for the keyword, world. Relevant information quickly appeared, indicating that long ago, cultivators had already established their basic worldview. The current world of cultivation was not the only existing world. Apart from this world, there were many other attached small worlds and miniature independent realms. Beyond the boundless void, there were other worlds similar to our own. Before the Great Calamity, the ancient and prosperous world of cultivation had extensive communication and interaction with these other worlds. Cultivators of that era referred to themselves as Xuanwang realm cultivators. Li Fan paused for a moment. Xuanwang. His thoughts swirled as he continued reading. However, for some reason, this connection and communication abruptly ceased at some point. There were cultivators who tried to traverse the void and explore other worlds they had previously communicated with, but none of them ever returned. Later, the Great Calamity arrived, bringing unprecedented changes. The Xuanwang realm seemed to self-isolate. Attempting to break through the void and leave this world became exponentially more challenging. It wasn't until hundreds of years had passed after the end of the slaughter and a new order was established that some new cultivators attempted to re-establish contact with other worlds. However, over these years, they had found nothing. Nevertheless, it appeared that research in this area had always been ongoing and had not been abandoned. I see, the Xuanwang realm, Li Fan mused. Could it be that the cleansing heart mantra was passed down from ancient times? But back then, the immortal mortal miasma had not appeared, so the timeline doesn't seem to match, Li Fan pondered. There were no clear written records of what exactly happened during ancient times, even within the Tianquan mirror. What was certain was that many cultivators from that era were still alive today, such as the white-haired elder Li Fan had encountered. However, they all seemed to maintain a unanimous silence on this matter, enveloping that period of history in mystery and ambiguity. Current cultivators could only rely on hearsay and rumors to gain some insight into the events of ancient times, as initially explained by Ko Hong. According to this narrative, the Great Calamity had occurred, and it was followed by the immortal miasma. However, later, Li Fan found the tomb of Yi Xing, an outer disciple of the Taiyan sect. According to the descriptions on the tomb's murals, the immortal miasma had already spread during the time of the Taiyan sect, so it seemed to contradict Ko Hong's account. Li Fan, on the other hand, had more faith in the archaeological evidence he'd gathered. According to Ko Hong's explanation, there seemed to have been some time between the prohibition of cultivators practicing the same technique and the complete outbreak of carnage. Perhaps this period was longer than he had initially thought. In his view, the cultivators at the time had surely realized the consequences of cultivation techniques not being able to be practiced together and had taken various measures to save themselves. The collapse of order wasn't an instantaneous event. The ancient world of cultivation might have been more resilient than he had imagined. Moreover, the time scale of cultivators, compared to ordinary people, was much larger. During ancient times, cultivators had long lifespans. For them, 10 or 20 years might have been nothing more than a single period of seclusion. Real fear, despair, and bloodshed might have erupted only when their cultivation reached a point where they could no longer advance, and their lifespans were running out. In the beginning, some semblance of order might have been maintained, but as the immortal miasma broke out, Li Fan narrowed his eyes. Of course, these were just speculations based on various known clues. The truth might still have some hidden aspects, but overall, it probably didn't differ too much from Li Fan's conjecture. While Li Fan was lost in thought, Zhao Shuyuan noticed that he hadn't received a response after explaining all that. So, he held up the small cauldron in front of Li Fan's eyes. "Fellow Taoist, what do you think? Do you want this Medicine King cauldron?" Li Fan immediately snapped out of his reverie, his expression unchanged. "What exactly is the use of this small cauldron, fellow Taoist Zhao? Please explain it again. I was thinking about something else just now." Zhao Shuyuan, somewhat helpless, repeated his introduction. This small Medicine King cauldron was used by the disciples of the Medicine King sect to cultivate various spirit plants and herbs. It contains its own space, which continuously generates would attribute spiritual energy, accelerating the growth of herbs. Li Fan frowned upon hearing this. With such a treasure, why didn't that person want it just now? Zhao Shuyuan gave an awkward smile and didn't lie. He truthfully explained, "Fellow Taoist, you might not know, but they have already put the first batch of spiritual plants and herbs cultivated in the newly discovered would attribute spiritual energy subworld of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance on the market. The quantity is enormous, so..." Zhao Shuyuan shrugged helplessly. "The prices have plummeted. Asterisk. 1 TL note. I believe the cleansing heart mantra includes the pinyin for Xuanwang in its Chinese name, which is why Li Fan makes this connection. I'm not entirely sure though. If anybody here speaks Chinese, here's the name, Zanhuang Qing Xinzhou." Chapter 114, Rain and Wind Enlightenment. With the large-scale, bulk supply of these spirit plants and herbs, the market prices for them have been dropping continuously. There are even rumors that there are 2 more similar-sized spirit energy subworlds near that wood element spirit energy subworld. Zhao Shuyuan shook his head, sighing. Just think about it. After working hard to cultivate these spirit plants and herbs for more than half a year, you excitedly harvest them, thinking they'll sell at a good price. But when you get to the market, you find they've all dropped to dirt cheap prices, and you can't even recover your production costs. Who can endure this situation? In times like these, who is willing to grow their own? It's better to buy in the market. Li Fan nodded, saying, "I see now. So, this little Medicine King cauldron is useless to me." Don't buy. Li Fan replied impatiently. Zhao Shuyuan continued to persuade, "Please reconsider, friend. While it's true that the prices for spirit plants and herbs have dropped now, what about the future? Will they go up again? No one knows for sure. Treasures like the little Medicine King cauldron are rare to come by. You'd regret it if you miss it." Even if you don't cultivate herbs, you can grow some flowers and plants as decoration. Zhao Shuyuan made full use of his eloquence to convince him. Well, since you put it that way. Li Fan seemed to be swaying. Zhao Shuyuan continued to push. I see, my friend, you must be a long-time customer of 1000 Mile Hall. Today, I'll sell this to you at a big loss. Buy one, get one free. Saying that, he took out another small cauldron, and with a thud, placed it on the table. Li Fan looked at the nearly identical two cauldrons, raising an eyebrow in doubt. Fellow Taoist, are you trying to deceive me? Is this little Medicine King cauldron truly something you excavated from the Medicine King sect's ruins? Zhao Shuyuan was anxious. He did not lie. He explained, this is guaranteed authentic. Our 1000 Mile Hall's business spans across the world of cultivation, and we would never tarnish our reputation. Look, there's still dirt on it. Zhao Shuyuan patted both cauldrons, making bits of soil fall off. 500 contribution points, buy one, get one free. Fellow Taoist, you're absolutely not losing out in this deal. Seeing Zhao Shuyuan's heartfelt guarantee, Li Fan contemplated for a moment and then shook his head, saying, never mind, I don't have many contribution points with me to begin with. I have other matters to attend to this time, and I don't have spare money to buy this little Medicine King cauldron. Zhao Shuyuan continued to persuade, don't hurry. Think about it again. Even though the prices of spirit plants and herbs have dropped now, who knows if they'll rise again in the future. This little Medicine King cauldron is a treasure. Once it's gone, you won't find another one. Seeing Zhao Shuyuan patting his chest in assurance, Li Fan pondered for a moment, but still shook his head, forget it, I don't have many contribution points on me in the first place. This time, I have other things to do. There's no money left over to buy this little Medicine King cauldron. Don't, tell me what's going on. I'll help you out, at least you are my old customer, don't you think so? Seeing that Li Fan had changed his attention, Zhao Shuyuan was anxious again. Only then did Li Fan explain his intentions. If you're looking for a place with a high concentration of foundation establishment stage cultivators, then if you buy these two little Medicine King cauldrons, I'll give you the information as a free gift. Alright, since you put it that way. Li Fan had no choice and immediately took out 5 high-grade spirit stones he had prepared earlier and handed them over. Good decision. Zhao Shuyuan seemed afraid that Li Fan would regret it and quickly took the spirit stones. He then took out a blank jade slip, holding it in his hand. After a while, he handed the jade slip and the 2 cauldrons to Li Fan. Li Fan stored the little Medicine King cauldrons and looked through the contents of the jade slip. Foundation Establishment Grand Master. Sounds interesting. With his goal achieved, Li Fan prepared to head directly to the location of his target. As for the 2 little Medicine King cauldrons, they were bought on a whim. Zhao Shuyuan's rationale was logical, and who knew if they would come in handy later. After taking a few steps, Li Fan suddenly remembered something. He turned around and looked at Zhao Shuyuan thoughtfully. Afterward, he left quietly. Zhao Shuyuan didn't pay much attention to Li Fan's actions and mumbled to himself, I worked hard to dig up 36 cauldrons, spending so much effort, and I only sold 10. Damn, I'm so unlucky. Southeastern waters of the Kongyun Sea. This sea area was quite spacious. Except for a nameless small island in the center, there were no other islands within a radius of thousands of miles. The Foundation Establishment Grand Master Zhao Shuyuan mentioned was on this island. Although this individual only had a foundation establishment stage cultivation, they were said to have a deep understanding of the foundation establishment process and could help reduce the time required for cultivation. Many cultivators came to seek their advice with the intention of trying it out. However, cultivators had their pride and usually didn't admit that they had relied on someone else's help for their foundation establishment success. So, it was rare for others to mention it. The reputation of this foundation establishment Grand Master was only spread within a specific circle of people. As Li Fan was rushing towards the island where the foundation establishment Grand Master was located, he received feedback from the strand of spiritual sense he had left with Zhang Haobo. Li Fan's spiritual sense moved, and his attention returned to Zhang Haobo. At this moment, the storm was gradually dispersing, and the sky had cleared up. Wind. Zhang Haobo opened his eyes and muttered softly, his eyes seeming to gather a storm. A gentle breeze swept by. Rain. Zhang Haobo spoke softly again, and the drizzling raindrops began to fall from the sky. Wind and rain combined. Zhang Haobo's eyes flickered, and he said in a low voice. A cool breeze blew, and the rain intensified gradually. Raindrops fell from the sky like a string of pearls breaking free. Rain fell as the wind rose. The sound of the wind grew louder and stronger. It pushed the rain to become heavier. Gradually, clouds from all directions were drawn towards the west, as if they were going to condense into thick dark clouds, bringing another sudden downpour. Fierce winds stirred up raging waves that continuously surged, showing signs of growing intensity. Rain rode on the wind, and the wind amplified the rain's power. In this cycle, they continually reinforced each other, as if it would never end. It seemed that a new storm was about to form in the sky. But suddenly, the clouds dissipated. The wind ceased abruptly. The strange phenomenon vanished without a trace. Zhang Haobo laughed loudly, and then he slumped back as if losing his strength. He fell from the sky into the sea, creating large splashes of water. He sank into the depths of the sea, his presence entirely disappearing. Wind and rain combined. Watching and listening to everything through vision of heaven and earth, Li Fan couldn't help but admire. Even though this magical technique couldn't be fully displayed due to Zhang Haobo's exhaustion, Li Fan could glimpse the formidable power it would have when perfected. I hope you can bring me more surprises in the future. Returning his focus to his main body, Li Fan continued on his way to the destination. 3 days later, the island where the Foundation Establishment Grand Master was located was now clearly visible. There appeared to be only one courtyard-like structure on the island. Li Fan reduced his flight speed and slowly descended in front of the small courtyard. The main gate was wide open, and a listless young man was leaning against it. He glanced at Li Fan and lazily said, "When the Grand Master makes a move, he guarantees that you'll achieve Foundation establishment, with no deception. You need to bring your own heavenly treasures. The price is 2,000 contribution points or the equivalent in spiritual stones." Chapter 115, Foundation Establishment Grand Master. "I am Li Fan. May I know your name?" Li Fan asked politely. The young man suddenly perked up when he heard this. "What a coincidence, fellow clan member. I'm Li Chenfeng. By the way, there's an entrance fee of 1,800 contribution points when you enter," Li Chenfeng whispered. "Thank you, Brother Li. However, I haven't found the right heavenly treasure yet. I came here just to see the style of the Foundation Establishment Grand Master and make plans," Li Fan explained. "Oh, that's fine. There are many people like you every year. The Master won't mind if you just observe," Li Chenfeng replied nonchalantly. "Just make sure to stay quiet and not disturb." Li Fan nodded and walked along the path into the courtyard. From a distance, he heard a voice saying, "Calm your mind and concentrate diligently. Do you know why I chose this remote location for our academy? It's because for thousands of miles in all directions, only seawater exists here. The Great Tao's laws are relatively pure here. If you were to break through on 10,000 Immortals Island, you would inevitably be subject to various disturbances, affecting the speed of your foundation building." Li Fan approached the courtyard and saw 5 qi condensation cultivators sitting cross-legged on the open ground. They exuded a mysterious aura, as if they were about to break through and successfully build their foundations. Li Fan's heart moved, and he immediately started using the formless killing intent to lock onto his targets. 1, 2, 3. By the time he reached the 4th one, Li Fan was already feeling somewhat strained. Including Zhang Haobo, the current limit seems to be 5 people, he calculated in his mind. Under my guidance, 265 cultivators have successfully built their foundations. Most of them took less time than expected. You all. The Foundation Establishment Grand Master, who looked dignified, was in the middle of sharing his experience. However, he suddenly stopped. He looked up with a hint of confusion, gazing at the sky for a while but couldn't sense anything unusual. So, he mumbled a few words and continued, "With my guidance, the time needed for foundation building can be greatly reduced. This Foundation Establishment Grand Master is really extraordinary. He could vaguely sense my formless killing intent." Li Fan's heart shivered. If his cultivation were slightly higher, he might have been able to trace me through the technique. One must not underestimate the people of the world. It seems that when I use the formless killing intent in the future, I'll need to be more cautious. Just when Li Fan was silently shivering, someone in the group seemed to have suddenly had an epiphany, perhaps as a result of the Foundation Establishment Grandmaster's words. His aura instantly surged from the Qi condensation stage to the Foundation Establishment stage. After stabilizing his aura, he opened his eyes, showing a delighted expression. He bowed to the Foundation Establishment Grandmaster and said, Thank you for your guidance, Master. I, Xiao, am deeply grateful. The Foundation Establishment Grand Master patted his shoulder and smiled reassuringly. Then, the man named Xiao took off. The remaining people in the courtyard all had a revived look, and their confidence was rekindled. The first Foundation Establishment cultivator has appeared, 10 days ahead of our initial estimate. Who will be the next one? The Foundation Establishment Grand Master reminded them. As Li Fan watched this scene from the sidelines, he couldn't help but feel a sense of amusement. The man named Xiao, who had just broken through to the Foundation Establishment stage, was precisely one of the 4 individuals locked onto by his formless killing intent. Although it seemed like he had indeed achieved a Foundation Establishment breakthrough, under the watchful eye of Li Fan's vision of heaven and earth, he could clearly see that there were no traces of laws condensing on the man's body. He had simply expanded his aura to reach the Foundation Establishment stage, but his actual cultivation was still at the Qi condensation stage. Indeed, it was just a simple illusionary technique like the concealing form talisman. Furthermore, this person didn't actually leave the area. They merely made a round trip while secretly returning. Their clothing and appearance changed in an instant, turning into a different person. This so-called Foundation Establishment Grand Master, could it be that they are actually a fraudster? Li Fan took another glance at the Foundation Establishment Grand Master, who had both white hair and a youthful countenance, looking like a true immortal. He couldn't help but sigh, thinking that there were truly remarkable individuals in the world. However, at this moment, not long after Xiao's breakthrough, another cultivator seemed to have a breakthrough. Inspired by the success of their fellow cultivator, they also showed signs of advancing. Li Fan's heart stirred because this time, the breakthrough was genuine. Through his vision of heaven and earth, he could see that a sorrowful sea lotus was faintly condensing in the cultivator's dantian. Li Fan immediately stopped diverting his attention and focused on comprehending the changes in the cultivator's body. After the sea lotus completely formed, the cultivator's aura suddenly erupted. This time, it was a true Foundation Establishment cultivator. The person opened their eyes, their face filled with joy. Master, thank you. Their words were concise, but their gratitude was clearly expressed. Go now, don't disturb their subsequent breakthroughs. The person nodded and left in excitement. Maybe they aren't entirely fraudsters, Li Fan mused. He pretended to take his leave and secretly remained around the island, observing the remaining 3 people. Over the next few days, 2 more people successfully broke through. The last person, however, took more than half a month to barely achieve the breakthrough. They sighed and left in a hurry. It doesn't matter if it's real or fake. What's important is to make the cultivators who achieve a breakthrough believe it's real. With enough confidence, they can accelerate their comprehension and achieve an early breakthrough. Moreover, some breakthroughs are real. Even if there are 1 or 2 individuals who don't get the expected results, when seeing others succeed, they might think it's a personal problem. Going a step further, even if they realize this is a scam, this Foundation Establishment Grand Master is a cultivator at the late Foundation Establishment stage. They wouldn't want to openly admit they were deceived. If that happens, the more than 200 cultivators who successfully built their foundations on this island earlier would undoubtedly come to trouble him. In that case, it might be swallow blood and bear it. How interesting, how interesting. This Foundation Establishment Grand Master is truly a clever person. After understanding the intricacies, Li Fan couldn't help but marvel. One person might only pay 2,000 contribution points, which didn't seem like much. However, when 265 cultivators were added together, it amounted to 500,000 contribution points in total. Li Fan couldn't help but have some dangerous thoughts. I wonder when this Foundation Establishment Grand Master opened for business. In the following period, Li Fan continued to lurk around the island. Using the formless killing intent to lock onto the cultivators who came in search of foundation building opportunities, he increased his comprehension with their breakthroughs. In less than 3 months, Li Fan observed the breakthrough process of more than 40 Qi condensation cultivators. His level of understanding of establishing the foundation gradually deepened. And just at that moment, he received a reminder from Zhang Haobo's side. It seemed that Zhang Haobo had successfully reached the late Qi condensation stage and was now searching for his own heavenly treasure. Chapter 116, Mortal Technique Thieves. The howling gales roared, raising monstrous waves. A feeble glowing barrier protected the island, trembling under the relentless pounding of gigantic waves. The spiritual energy in the world ran rampant like a frenzied beast racing and colliding. Endless winds seemed to appear from nowhere, raging between the sky and the ocean. This was a scene of a common wind disaster in the Kongyun Sea. In the midst of the hurricane, Zhang Haobo was like a piece of driftwood, constantly rising and falling. There was no spiritual energy around him. However, through the eyes of Li Fan, he could faintly perceive a unique rhythm of spiritual energy emerging from Zhang Haobo's body. It appeared as if he was mimicking the omnipresent wind in the world. Zhang Haobo's mind settled, and he closed his eyes to contemplate. It was only when the storm gradually subsided that he opened his eyes. After a brief sense, he floated towards a specific direction. There was still no spiritual energy fluctuation, but his speed was incredibly fast. He really seemed like a gentle breeze brushing through the world. This technique is quite impressive, Li Fan nodded slightly. However, he seems to be contemplating something again. Wasn't he looking for heavenly treasures to build his foundation? Li Fan sensed that Zhang Haobo was heading toward another brewing storm. Zhang Haobo was chasing the wind. Interesting. It seemed that he had no intention of building his foundation anytime soon. Therefore, most of Li Fan's attention returned to the matter of the foundation establishment Grandmaster. More than 10 days had passed since the last group of qi condensation cultivators successfully built their foundations and left. According to past experience, there would typically be 1 or 2 new arrivals every 7 to 8 days. However, this time, no one had shown up after more than 10 days. It was abnormal. So, the 3 individuals on the island began to get uneasy. They gathered every day to discuss something. Li Fan, who was secretly observing, activated his formless killing intent to lock onto a young man named Li Chenfeng. He wanted to figure out what they were planning. One day, the 3 of them gathered in secret once again. Li Fan listened attentively from his vantage point, having a clear view of their discussions in the room. The foundation establishment Grandmaster appeared anxious, casting an anxious look upwards and muttering, "It's happening again. I'm getting that feeling again. Come on, old man, are you really this scared?" Li Chenfeng didn't quite understand but still looked serious. The foundation establishment Grandmaster shook his head, "You guys don't understand. Although I'm stuck at the later stage of foundation establishment, I've witnessed hundreds of scenes of successful foundation building. I'm extremely sensitive to the fluctuations of the laws of heaven and earth. It can't be wrong, it's that feeling of being observed again. Maybe some powerful figure is watching us." The wrinkled face of the foundation establishment Grandmaster seemed to pale. Once or twice could be just accidental glances, but it's been many times now. Is this a warning or? Enough, stop scaring yourself. Li Chenfeng interrupted impatiently, slamming his hand on the table to boost their morale. Moreover, this secret chamber is isolated by a birth-death array, shielding divine senses. It's not that easy to be broken through, Li Chenfeng added. However, Li Chenfeng shifted the topic, "But old man, your concerns aren't entirely baseless. Our purpose has always been not to stay in one place for too long, make a profit, and then leave. However, the Kongyun Sea is vast, and there are a considerable number of foundation building cultivators every year, which is why we've stayed here for so long." He continued, "Our original plan was to stay for another 7 or 8 years before leaving. Now it seems that we've earned quite a bit of profit, and we've attracted someone's attention." Li Chenfeng analyzed calmly, "So, it's best to leave early. We'll pack up our things, and tomorrow morning we'll set out. Next, we'll head north to Yongliang Prefecture. That's the territory of the 5 Elders Association. Once we get there, even if the people from the 10,000 Immortals Alliance want to cause trouble for us, it won't be that easy." The man named Xiao chimed in, "Right, once we arrive there, we can change our identities and use our old tricks." Li Chenfeng suddenly lowered his voice and asked, "Old man, how close are we to exchanging for the sea-swallowing eternal life technique?" The foundation establishment Grandmaster squinted, "It's close. If we're careful and work for another 50 or so years, we should be able to exchange for it." Xiao sighed, "It's really not easy. Old man, you've been away from your hometown for nearly 100 years, right?" The foundation establishment Grandmaster couldn't help but feel sentimental. "Yes, it's been that long. Back then, I overcame countless hardships, broke through the immortal extinction formation, and arrived in the cultivation world. It's been over 98 years now." Li Chenfeng said in a solemn tone, "A Dao integration technique is extraordinary, of course. To think that it will only take a little over 100 years to exchange for it is truly a stroke of luck." The foundation establishment Grandmaster felt somewhat embarrassed. "It's all thanks to your cleverness, Li. In just 1 year, I've gained more than I did in 10 years before. The man surnamed Xiao also praised Li. Li Chenfeng didn't show a sense of satisfaction on his face but said solemnly, the closer we get to success, the more careful we must be. After 100 years of planning and countless sacrifices, we cannot afford to fail. The Foundation Establishment Grandmaster's expression turned serious. Li is right. Xiao spoke in a low voice, as long as we can bring back the sea-swallowing eternal life technique, all the sacrifices will be worth it. Li Chenfeng sighed, I don't know how many new Void Ripper whales have been cultivated over the years. When the Empress calculated it, she found that only a group of 100,000 Void Ripper whales would be able to counteract the attraction of the cultivation world to our homeland. 30 years ago, when I left my hometown, the group had a size of only around 70,000. 30 years, 30,000. Difficult. Li Chenfeng shook his head. The Foundation Establishment Grandmaster comforted him, the number of Void Ripper whales is insufficient, but we can slowly cultivate more in the future. As long as we bring back the Dao integration technique, we can help the Empress subdue those opposing forces. By then, with the full force of the Empire, we can certainly lead the Empire away from this realm within 10 years. Once we have established a lineage with the sea-swallowing eternal life technique, we can break free from the restrictions of immortal techniques not being able to be practiced together. In the future, more and more cultivators will emerge from the Empire. The Empire's future is very bright. The Foundation Establishment Grandmaster's words filled Li Chenfeng and the man surnamed Xiao with a vision of a hopeful future. After a while, the three clasped their hands together tightly. For the Empire, for the Empress. A fanatical expression appeared on all three of their faces as they spoke in unison. The Empire, stealing cultivation techniques, leaving the cultivation world. Li Fan watched this scene from afar and had a strange look in his eyes. It seems that those small worlds and sanctuaries that the mortals migrated to in the past aren't all like the Grand Zon, completely devoid of spiritual energy. Or perhaps, that was indeed the case in the beginning. It's just that, over thousands of years, some changes have occurred. The ability to cultivate and control a group of 100,000 Void Ripper whales. This so-called empire is undoubtedly powerful. I wonder what methods they are using. Chapter 117, Devouring White Mist Barrier. On the next day, Li Chenfeng and his two companions quietly left the island. In the perception of the formless killing intent, they continued northward, getting farther and farther away. The perception became increasingly blurry, and Li Fan cancelled the lock on Li Chenfeng. Is there still another 4 or 5 decades left? If there's a chance in the future, we can visit their empire. However, in this lifetime, Li Fan needed to first advance his cultivation to the Foundation establishment stage. Upon returning to the 10,000 Immortals Island, Li Fan first secluded himself to cultivate for some time, digesting his insights from observing the Foundation establishment process. After emerging from seclusion, he checked the geographical map of the Kong Yun Sea area that his clone Fan Lin had obtained. He had considered exchanging the entire map of the Xuanwang realm at once, but the Tianxuan mirror displayed that he lacked the necessary authority to view it. Therefore, he could only settle for a more limited exchange, starting with the geographical area around the Kong Yun Sea. As the map materialized in his mind, Li Fan discovered that the seemingly boundless Kong Yun Sea was, in fact, an inland sea. It was as if someone had forcibly carved a gap into the mainland, nearly encircling the Kong Yun Sea. Only in the southeast, through a relatively narrow sea area, was it connected to the endless ocean. To the north of the Kong Yun Sea was Yongliang Province, where Li Chenfeng and his group had fled. To the west and south, from top to bottom, were Jushan Province, Shilin Province, and Yuandao Province, all of which belonged to the 10,000 Immortals Alliance's territory. Yongliang Province to the north was under the control of the Five Elders Association. It's been almost 14 years, and it's time to plan an escape. After obtaining the Kanghai Pearl, we should leave the Kong Yun Sea as soon as possible. My clone can stay here to observe the situation. As for where to go, Li Fan thoroughly reviewed the information about the various provinces. Yongliang Province, bordering Jushan Province, was not very peaceful. Shilin Province and Yuandao Province were relatively similar. However, Yuandao Province was adjacent to the boundless ocean and had abundant water-based spiritual energy. Considering the need to use the Kanghai Pearl for Foundation establishment in the future, it made more sense to head to Yuandao Province. Li Fan also noticed that in the Xuanwang realm, the boundaries between provinces were not artificially designated by humans. The separation between provinces was naturally created by something called the white mist barrier. Both mortals and cultivators could pass through it. However, the cost of crossing the white mist barrier was one's lifespan. The longer the time spent crossing it, the more lifespan was consumed. Mortals rarely dared to cross the white mist barrier on their own because, at their pace, they often perished before making it to the other side. Even though cultivators could fly at extremely high speeds, each crossing of the white mist barrier cost at least 30 days of their lifespan. While it might not be a significant amount, frequent crossings would eventually wear down even a golden core cultivator. Therefore, most cultivators adhered to a principle: they only moved when necessary and mostly stayed within their respective provinces. Luckily, each province was vast, and they were well supplied thanks to the existence of large organizations like the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, which spanned the entire cultivation world. So, for many cultivators, staying within one province for their entire lives didn't significantly hinder their cultivation. Of course, there were long-distance teleportation arrays that allowed travel between provinces, reducing the lifespan cost to around 10 days. However, the expense was substantial, and only a small number of cultivators used this method. Li Fan checked and found that there was no white mist barrier between Yuandao Province and the Kongyun Sea. Furthermore, there were specialized teleportation arrays within 10,000 Immortals Island to reach Yuandao Province. If I can successfully reproduce the mountain meditation technique, then learning about gifted prodigies will become more important. For a moment, several figures flashed through Li Fan's mind. After leaving, maybe I can take them along to test the effectiveness of the mountain meditation technique, Li Fan contemplated. However, it would be inconvenient to bring mortals along. I need to make some preparations in advance. Li Fan had previously attempted to include living people on the Taiyan boat, but it couldn't be stored in truth afterwards. After some consideration, he decided to use the teleportation array to visit Yuandao Province. The overall layout of Yuandao Province was similar to that of the Kongyun Sea. Nearly every major mortal city had defensive formations and foundation establishment cultivators guarding them. Above Yuandao Province, a massive floating city stood. It was named after the province, Yuandao Heavenly City. The layout inside Yuandao City was identical to 10,000 Immortals Island, almost like it was copied from a template, which gave Li Fan a sense of familiarity. In the center of the city, the Tianquan mirror was still present. When Li Fan entered, he found it to be exactly the same as when he used it on 10,000 Immortals Island. Furthermore, in Yuandao City, Li Fan saw a familiar figure. It seems that this should be the case in areas under the rule of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance. I wonder what the situation is with the Five Elders Association. Mortals couldn't enter Yuandao Heavenly City. The largest city in Yuandao Province was called Zhouling City. After teleporting to Zhouling City, Li Fan exchanged a courtyard with the city's guardians in exchange for 50 contribution points, which would serve as his base for future activities. Following this, Li Fan took out the Taiyan boat and flew back from Yuandao Province to the Kongyun Sea, to explore the route for their later withdrawal. By the time he returned to 10,000 Immortals Island, the 14th year had already come. During this period, Zhang Haobo had been constantly pursuing the trace of the wind disaster. Initially, he would sometimes misjudge the timing and location of the wind disaster's appearance. However, over time, Zhang Haobo's premonitions became increasingly accurate. He would often arrive on the scene of each wind disaster right on time. But now, Zhang Haobo had stopped chasing the winds. He floated in the air, gazing up at something. He remained as still as a stone statue. This had been going on for quite some time. However, gradually, an unusual aura began to emanate from Zhang Haobo. Li Fan immediately refocused his attention on Zhang Haobo. Suddenly, Zhang Haobo's clothes rustled without any wind, and he started to rise upward as if pushed by an invisible force from below. He ascended slowly at first, then accelerated, becoming a streak of light shooting up into the sky. His speed increased, and he soared toward the sky. However, when he reached a certain height, he abruptly stopped. Then he began to hover continuously in this space as if searching for something. But he couldn't enter. Zhang Haobo's face remained calm, and he turned into a gentle breeze, continually blowing through this area. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. As time passed, it seemed he still hadn't found anything. But Li Fan noticed that Zhang Haobo's range of activity was steadily decreasing. When the final area was determined, Zhang Haobo let out a loud shout, accelerated suddenly, turned into a green light, and forcefully collided with the void. A nearly imperceptible blue light also shone at the right time on his body. Zhang Haobo's figure suddenly disappeared from the world. And Li Fan's perspective was also taken into a strange space. A translucent green figure stood there with closed eyes. In their hands, they held a cage composed of green light. A jet-black sword handle exuded a sinister aura, relentlessly striking the cage, attempting to break free. Bang, bang, bang. Occasionally, strands of green light were released from the cage during its impact, floating down and landing in various places in the Kongyun Sea. Transforming into wind disasters. Chapter 118, Sword Wind Enlightenment. This is the heavenly spirit, green wind. Li Fan's mind was greatly shaken. This green figure was so similar to the crimson flame from the previous lifetime. The only difference was the distinct convergence of the principles of wind on this being. Even through his vision of heaven and earth, the allure of the heavenly spirit was overwhelmingly strong, instantly affecting Li Fan's mental state. From a distance of thousands of miles, Li Fan's observation perspective became distorted. It shifted from Zhang Haobo, the primary subject of observation, to the green figure known as Green Wind. Inside the Tianquan mirror, within Li Fan's sea of consciousness, the azure flame illusionary spirit suddenly awakened. It opened its eyes and gazed in the direction where Green Wind was located. In an instant, the temperature of the azure flame illusionary spirit dropped, as if it had been doused with icy water. The insatiable desire that had expanded countless times within Li Fan gradually subsided. His mind turned extremely cold and rational, allowing Li Fan to silently observe the strange scene once again. After staring at Green Wind for a long time, Li Fan shifted his gaze to the black sword handle. The ominous aura that shot up into the sky almost materialized into a substantial layer of twisted black substance, covering the surface of the sword handle. Beneath the handle, you could faintly see a short, broken sword blade. This black sword handle resembled a living creature as it violently slammed against the green cage. It occasionally emitted horrifying roars, causing the chaotic green light to tremble. But no matter how it struggled, it couldn't break free from the green cage. In this seemingly empty cage, Li Fan faintly sensed the continuous surge of a terrifying green current. The speed of the current's movement was too fast, beyond the limits of what Li Fan could perceive at that moment. So, at first glance, it appeared peaceful inside the cage. But judging from the occasional green light that fell into various places in the Kongyun Sea, the power of the storm surging within the cage was beyond imagination. The green wind was like a blade, continuously slashing at the sword handle, constantly breaking and destroying the black ominous substance. This mysterious sword handle, for some unknown reason, was exceptionally fierce. But under Green Wind's prolonged imprisonment and erosion, it gradually became more and more broken. Who could have imagined that the wind disasters raging through the Kongyun Sea were actually the unintentional side effects of the struggle between the heavenly spirit and a sword handle? The power of Tao integration is indeed terrifying. In the last life, the major wind disaster never appeared again. Perhaps it's because this sword handle was completely destroyed. And what exactly is the origin of this sword handle? It's just a damaged hilt, and it can resist the heavenly spirit in Tao integration for so long. If it were in its complete state, how much stronger would it be? Various thoughts flashed through Li Fan's mind repeatedly. Afterward, he shifted his gaze back to Zhang Haobo. In general, ordinary cultivators can't perceive Tao integration beings. They are hidden in this secret space. Zhang Haobo has extraordinary talent, and he can sense the wind disaster calamity and roughly detect the location of this space. But with his cultivation in the qi condensation stage, there's no way he can break in. Unless, in Li Fan's field of vision, a layer of clear blue light enveloped Zhang Haobo. As if unaffected by the heavenly spirit's allure, Zhang Haobo didn't even glance at Green Wind's figure. Instead, he focused intently on the cage in its hand. He observed the struggle between Green Wind and the sword handle within the cage. Under the cover of the blue light, Green Wind was completely oblivious, as if he ignored Zhang Haobo's presence and allowed him to observe at close range. Li Fan thought, before reaching Tao integration, conducting such an observation is truly like walking on a razor's edge. However, he indeed has something to rely on. The familiar blue light kept flowing, and Li Fan, like Zhang Haobo, observed the struggle between Green Wind and the sword handle. With the flow of destiny, Zhang Haobo's luck continues to grow. Within the Kongyun Sea, he already has a taste of being a child of heaven. Things go his way, and opportunities come naturally. Unfortunately, let's see how his story ends. This hidden place would be nearly impossible to discover with my efforts alone, even after several lifetimes of reincarnation. But with Zhang Haobo's immense luck, he can easily find it. Within just the Kong Yun Sea, there are countless opportunities. When we look at the entire cultivation world, how many secrets are there truly? Exploring everything alone would be inefficient. However, with all the natural prodigies as my eyes, they can find these treasures for me one by one. In the next life, I'll take everything useful. Good. His thoughts gradually fell silent, and Li Fan concentrated all his attention together with Zhang Haobo. They were trying to comprehend the battle between the sword and the wind. Such an opportunity was extremely rare, and Li Fan didn't want to waste it. Time passed slowly. For cultivators, a few years of seclusion was considered normal. After an unknown amount of time, Li Fan was abruptly awakened by the brilliant blue light bursting forth from Zhang Haobo's body. After a brief flicker, Zhang Haobo suddenly left the mysterious space where green wind and the sword handle were located. Like a shooting star, he fell straight into the deep sea. The energy swirling around him, Li Fan was very familiar with. It was a sign that Zhang Haobo was about to break through from the qi condensation stage to the foundation establishment stage. Li Fan found it a bit strange because the heavenly treasure that Zhang Haobo was using to imitate the process of foundation establishment differed from what he had anticipated. A clear and crisp sound of a sword rang out. It was like the first cry of a newborn baby, or the first rays of the morning sun. The chaotic and uncomprehending willpower began to grow continuously from the moment it was born. The sound of the sword's roar became clearer and more exhilarating. Clang! The sword sound reached its sharpest point and suddenly disappeared. At the same time, within Zhang Haobo's dantian, a vague and ever-changing sword shadow suddenly appeared. Under the dark sea, the seawater around Zhang Haobo was instantly repelled, leaving a circular area without water. The sword shadow, like a mischievous and vibrant child, stretched lazily. Then it surprisingly flew out of Zhang Haobo's dantian, hovering and rotating in the empty area around him. Li Fan could see clearly that this sword shadow had no physical form. It resembled the azure flame illusionary spirit in many ways, being a purely conscious existence. This is sword intent. Li Fan was somewhat shocked. He hadn't expected that in such a short time, Zhang Haobo would comprehend the sword intent by observing the sword handle. It's worth noting that although Li Fan had gained some insight into it, he was far from reaching such an exaggerated level. Li Fan couldn't help but sigh. The difference in people's talents was indeed substantial. However, Li Fan was also somewhat surprised because Zhang Haobo was using this sword intent as a heavenly treasure to establish his foundation. It proved the correctness of Master Yin's theory that everything in the world can be seen as unformed heavenly treasures. If sword intent could be used, then truth could naturally be used as well. Moreover, the process where Zhang Haobo established his foundation using sword intent provided Li Fan with plenty of inspiration. However, establishing a foundation using truth was much more challenging than using sword intent to establish one. To achieve this goal, Li Fan still had a long way to go. Chapter 119, The Five Element Subworlds. Zhang Haobo opened his eyes, and the wandering sword intent swiftly returned to his dantian. As the sharpness in his eyes slowly faded away, he appeared unremarkable and harmless. Li Fan, observing Zhang Haobo's changes, couldn't help but marvel. To achieve such a level of concealing one's presence and returning to a state of simplicity and innocence during the foundation establishment stage was truly remarkable. Indeed, Zhang Haobo possessed exceptional talent. After spending a while underwater to familiarize himself with the newly reached foundation establishment stage, Zhang Haobo promptly flew to the ocean's surface. Without a moment's rest, he began practicing the sea-fixing sword technique. One after another, the blue water swords appeared and danced in the air. Under Zhang Haobo's control, the blue swords crisscrossed the sky, and Water Dragon's sword. Li Fan, who was covertly observing, noticed something. With the unknown sword intent he comprehended to establish his foundation, Zhang Haobo's sea-fixing sword technique showed some noticeable changes. If the previous sea-fixing sword technique was grand and dignified, the present version, infused with a mysterious sword intent, harbored hidden madness and ruthlessness within its mighty sword techniques. Moreover, Li Fan had a faint feeling. Zhang Haobo was still holding back. An overwhelming malevolent aura remained concealed. Once this malevolent aura that originated from the black sword hilt erupted, the power of the sea-fixing sword technique would likely increase several times instantly. Zhang Haobo tirelessly practiced the sea-fixing sword technique on the uninhabited sea surface without any rest. Day and night, wind and rain were of no concern. The countless dots of blue light converged from all directions in the ocean, and within his home ground of the Kongyun Sea, Zhang Haobo had no worries about depleting his spiritual energy. He could practice without restraint. In this manner, although his cultivation stage remained at the early foundation establishment level, his actual combat power was rapidly improving. The most visible aspect of his progress was the number of divine sea swords he could manifest. These past few days, they had increased from 36 to 72, and now to 108. In just over a month since entering the foundation establishment stage, Zhang Haobo, who had recently arrived in this stage, had perfected the sea-fixing sword technique. While external factors were at play, there was no denying that Zhang Haobo's talent was genuinely astonishing. With 108 divine sea swords simultaneously released, the sky was filled with the roars of water dragons. In Li Fan's eyes, this level of power surpassed that of Ko Hong and Dao Xuanzi, both of whom were in the late foundation establishment stage. It's important to note that Zhang Haobo achieved this without using any foundation treasure. Upon seeing Zhang Haobo's rapid progress, Li Fan couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. What will you do next? I only gave you the sea-fixing sword technique, up to the foundation establishment stage. Could you really deduce the golden core stage on your own? Li Fan was skeptical. In the world of cultivation, it was possible to create new techniques, but it wasn't a task that could be accomplished solely with extraordinary talent. It required an extremely profound understanding of techniques as a foundation, allowing one to create new techniques from scratch. In the immortal cultivation world, such cultivators who could deduce new techniques were honored as master pathweavers. The position of a master artificer was highly revered and held significant respect, even above that of master artifact refiners, master alchemists, rune masters, and formation masters in any organization. Moreover, there were grand master pathweavers who were highly skilled, with a transcendent understanding of techniques. They were able to design custom techniques for cultivators. Their status could even be on par with that of immortal sages. Currently, Zhang Haobo, despite his exceptional talent, had only cultivated the sea-fixing sword technique. Deducing the golden core stage from the foundation establishment stage of the sea-fixing sword technique was indeed possible, but the chances were incredibly low. Li Fan was curious about what Zhang Haobo would do next. However, at the moment, Zhang Haobo, who was in the early stage of foundation establishment, did not have to worry about the cultivation technique. He acted as the best teacher, repeating and meticulously demonstrating various moves from the sea-fixing sword technique in front of Li Fan time and time again. He was incredibly patient and thorough. Li Fan devoted most of his attention to studying and comprehending. The rest of his focus was directed back into the 10,000 profound mirror. They say that cultivation knows no years, and it was indeed true. During the period of time that Li Fan and Zhang Haobo were cultivating, time quietly slipped away. Now, it had reached the 16th year. The grand event of the crimson flame burning the sea was getting closer and closer. Li Fan began by looking into the major events that had occurred during these 2 years. Due to the influence of the heavens, although only 2 years had passed, many records of various events have been lost. But afterward, Li Fan visited cultivators like Yuan Xing, continuously inquiring and piecing together the clues. He recorded these events one by one. Although he was sure that he would slowly forget these events in the near future, it didn't matter. Because in the next life, Li Fan would remember these events once again. Li Fan studied the records in his hands, and a few of them piqued his interest. In the 14th year, shortly after he and Zhang Haobo entered their enlightenment, something significant seemed to have occurred in the northwestern region of the Kongyun Sea, near the border between Yongliang Prefecture and Jushan Prefecture. The local specialty, the gold flying fish, had its price skyrocket by 50 times in a short period. It only lasted for 7 days before quickly falling back. However, all the surviving buyers couldn't recall why they had bought these glistening gold flying fish, or what had happened at that time. This was the first event. The second interesting event took place in the 15th year. A fiery meteor lit up the sky and streaked across the night. It was unclear where it had fallen. All the cultivators who saw this meteor couldn't help but feel a sense of fear, sorrow, and other emotions. There had been attempts to find the crash site of the meteor, but it seemed that no one could locate it. The third event had occurred not long ago. The rumors mentioned by Zhao Shuyuan were confirmed. Near the wood element spirit energy subworld, there were indeed 2 other subworlds nearby. But the reality was more exaggerated than the rumors. There weren't just 2 subworlds hidden there, there were 4. These 5 subworlds belonged to the gold, wood, water, fire, and earth elements, and they were subtly connected as if they formed a single entity. The discovery of these 5 element subworlds was truly astonishing. It even attracted the covetousness of the 5 Elders Association. The 2 sides engaged in a battle near the subworlds, and in the end, the 10,000 Immortals Alliance repelled the 5 Elders Association at the cost of a soul transformation cultivator. Later on, in order to prevent further disputes and to protect the 5 element subworlds, the 10,000 Immortals Alliance paid a great price to move the entire subworld to a location near the Tianyu prefecture. Li Fan firmly stored this information in his mind. These were all important channels for gaining benefits in the next life. Chapter 120. Li Fan's desire to create techniques. In these past few years, the clone hasn't been idle. It has been voraciously browsing through various hidden knowledge of the cultivation world, rapidly depleting its contribution points. Now, there are only a little over 73,000 points left. The current knowledge reserve should be sufficient for most situations. Therefore, Li Fan decided to take a break for now. In the upcoming period, he plans to focus his energy on studying techniques. As he is about to break through to the foundation establishment stage, it's time to upgrade some of his existing techniques. The Jade Cosmos Thousand Variations Sutra can be practiced all the way up to the nascent soul stage, so there's no immediate need to change it. The same goes for the Cloud Water Illusory Dream Art. However, the sun stealing technique, according to its records, could be practiced up to the Tao integration stage in ancient times. But over the many years, the sun stealing sect seemed to decline, and there were no reports of practitioners reaching such high levels. In the past 2,000 years, there was only a single record of a soul transformation cultivator. Most could only progress to the nascent soul stage. Thinking about the sun stealing token still lying in his storage ring, Li Fan had a strong premonition. After reaching the foundation establishment stage, he decided to seize an opportunity to give it a try. The stalking shadow technique is just a relatively common body movement technique. It could be replaced at any time with a foundation establishment stage technique. After observing Zhang Haobo's sword intent, which was as gentle as a breeze, Li Fan gained insights. Perhaps he could combine the essence of that sword intent with the stalking shadow technique to create a completely new technique. The Netherworld Spirit Illusion technique was particularly important to Li Fan. The Azure Flame Illusionary Spirit had various mystical effects, especially its ability to resist the desires brought about by the world soul. So, Li Fan searched in the Tianquan mirror to find foundation establishment stage techniques that could nurture illusory spirits. He found several, and there was even one called the Unholy Netherworld Spirit Illusion technique. This was an upgraded version of the Netherworld Spirit Illusion technique. But Li Fan didn't rush to exchange it. After observing how Zhang Haobo condensed sword intent, Li Fan believed he could try to integrate this insight with the Netherworld Spirit Illusion technique to create a new technique. Yes, Li Fan was going to try to be a pathweaver. Li Fan knew that creating new techniques was extremely difficult, but he didn't have a quantitative understanding of just how difficult it was. He figured that the best way to understand was to try it himself. He had his secondary body, boosted by the Tianquan Mirror's Enlightenment Mode and the Golden Luli Pearl, which increased his insight efficiency by a factor of 27. The contribution points remaining on his secondary body would support continuous closed-door cultivation for 10 years. In these next 270 years, he could work on creating 2 foundation establishment stage techniques. Li Fan pondered, though he might only be an average individual, there was still a high probability of success. After all, ordinary foundation establishment cultivators could live for approximately this long. If he succeeded, he could break free from the constraints of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance's techniques, and his next life would allow him to cultivate directly. Moreover, what was even more important was that he was pioneering a new, feasible method for obtaining techniques. By using the raw techniques obtained through the 10,000 Immortals Alliance as a base, integrating the insights he gained from the Tianquan Mirror's enlightenment abilities, and refining them with his observance of prodigies through formless killing intent and vision of heaven and earth, he could create new techniques for his main body's cultivation. If this production chain turned out to be truly viable, then he, Li Fan, could barely be called a pathweaver. With a determined mind, Li Fan no longer hesitated. His secondary body's spiritual sense immersed itself in closed-door cultivation to begin the enlightenment process. On Zhang Haobo's side, he continued to diligently cultivate without rest each day. His cultivation speed not only didn't slow down as he entered the foundation establishment stage but instead increased. However, on Li Fan's side, he had decided to wait for the emergence of the Kanghai Pearl before breaking into foundation establishment. So, his cultivation had temporarily come to a halt. During this time, he couldn't find much to do and instead enjoyed some rare leisure on the 10,000 Immortals Island. He spent his days leisurely strolling on the island and making friends with many Qi condensation and foundation establishment cultivators. These cultivators might not have outstanding strength, but they were the grassroots of the 10,000 Immortals Alliance's control of the Kongyun Sea. Most of them were knowledgeable and not ordinary individuals. Interacting with them, Li Fan learned much from the experience. After some time passed, Li Fan suddenly received a transmission message. Chen. Li Fan looked at the name and frowned slightly. But soon, he remembered who Chen was. It was the Qi condensation cultivator who had asked him about the mysteries of Qin Tang's trial in the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. This man had managed to survive the trial involving Qin Tang, and he promptly retreated and left the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace. He was quite cautious. For years, there had been no contact between them. Li Fan was curious about why Chen was reaching out now. He opened the message, and the image of Chen with a smile appeared. Fellow Taoist Li Fan, how have you been lately? Since the day we parted at the Cloudwater Heavenly Palace, it has been over 5 years. Your outstanding performance in solving the Qin Tang anomaly is still vivid in my memory, unforgettable. Recently, something unusual has happened in the Kongyun Sea, which you might find interesting. After listening to Chen An's transmission, Li Fan understood why Chen An had suddenly contacted him. Recently, in the Kongyun Sea, an extraordinary event had occurred. A massive, constantly shifting white mist suddenly appeared in the Kongyun Sea. A curious cultivator who flew into the white mist found a colossal, mountain-like blue bull pulling a two-wheeled cart, walking on the sea. On the cart was a dilapidated thatched cottage. Outside the cottage stood 2 strange creatures. One of them had no mouth and had a terrifying appearance, while the other was robust and strong, carrying a wooden staff. From inside the cottage, a faint, melodious sound of someone reading aloud could be heard. This bizarre sight naturally drew the curiosity of the cultivator. This individual was quite bold. Convinced that there must be a chance to gain some fortune in this, he flew to the front of the thatched cottage to investigate. However, he was blocked by the 2 doorkeepers. Politely, he greeted them and attempted to enter the cottage. However, there was no response, and instead, he was struck with a chaotic beating from the wooden staff, expelling him from the range of the blue bull's cart. When he tried to approach again, he found that no matter what he did, he couldn't fly close to the thatched cottage. So, he had no choice but to give up. He returned and informed his best friend about this event. They were also intrigued. They came together and visited the blue bull's cart the next day. Surprisingly, the cultivator found that he could once again approach the thatched cottage. So, the 2 of them cautiously approached and were struck by the wooden staff again, forcing them out. However, they didn't get discouraged. On the 3rd day, they tried once more, and the result remained the same. But they were not disheartened. In fact, they were somewhat delighted because, since there was no danger to life, they could simply invite more people. They would definitely find a way to enter the thatched cottage.